How many people are watching?
Yeah. Well, no, not how many or what.
Okay, we are live now.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 1st meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. We'll first start out here with roll call. Kathy.
I was muted. I said, happy Tuesday. Good to see y'all. And it told me I was muted. All right. Mayor Lydia Lavelle.
Yeah, I was just reading you. I'm here.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Barbara Foushee.
Present.
Councilmember Jacqueline Gist.
Present.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell. Is she here?
She won't be here, and she's going to ask to be excused once.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Susan Romaine.
Present.
Councilmember Damon Stiles.
Present.
And Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present.
Thank you.
So, Jackie, would you go ahead and make a motion for Randy?
Yes. Councilmember Haven O'Donnell asked that we excuse her this evening. Her husband got a new knee this morning and she's home taking care of him. So I move that we excuse Councilmember Haven O'Donnell.
Second.
Motion by Jackie to excuse Randy from this meeting, second by Sammy. All in favor, say aye. Susan?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Sammy? Me? Aye. Jackie?
Aye.
And Barbara?
Aye, and Braxton said the screen is black. I don't know. It's not on TV.
Okay. The TV.
Yeah.
All right.
What would we do without Braxton? And I want, since Randy will watch this, I want us all to wish Jerry a speedy recovery and hope he enjoys his new knee.
Yes, of course. All right. All right, let's go ahead and bring, while we're trying to get the television going on, let's go ahead and bring Fred over here, Kathy, for our poem to start us off this evening.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Fred.
How's everybody doing?
Good. Just good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I am going to read a poem by a poet who's a friend of mine, Taylor Johnson, from their collection, Inheritance. This is, I mean, I probably read this poem anyway, just because I love Taylor's work, but Taylor is, I'm reading their poem in honor of Pride Month. And so, yeah, Taylor, I'm not, all I know is that Taylor identifies the pronouns that Taylor uses are they, them, their. And I had the pleasure of being in a workshop with her. I ran a workshop when they were a teenager. And so to see this book is like, yes, like you did it. Yeah, the book is called Inheritance. The poem is called State of Decline. And I love this poem just because it's just like a slice of life. Like there's no grand conceit in the poem. It's just like a slice of life. State of Decline. The room is dying, honey and lemon rind. Soured light. My grandmother sits in her chair, sweetening into the blue velvet. Domestic declension is the window that never opens. The paint peeling, dusting the sill and inhaled. It is the American love she lives in. My grandmother, rigored to televangelists and infomercials, losing the use of her legs, needing to be turned like a mattress. No one is coming for her. The dog is asleep in the yard. Her husband, obedient to the grease and garlic in the cast iron, salting her death in the Wind House. So I know it's not the most uplifting poem, but it's a beautiful poem.
It is.
And it does speak to her love for her. It does speak to, well, the speaker's love in the poem to the love of their grandmother and grandfather. And I thought that was just a beautiful way, a beautiful and kind of, not tragic, but sad way, melancholy, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Fred. And
thank you.
Thank you for spotlighting Pride Month. And I know we've talked about you're intended to do so this month. So
absolutely. Inheritance by Taylor Johnson. So they are currently living in, I think, New Orleans, but they are a DC writer. So I'm proud to always spotlight another fellow DC writer, even though I'm far removed from there.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Fred.
Bye-bye.
All right, y'all. So we have a couple of, we have 3 different proclamations tonight. The first one is a proclamation recognizing Pride Month. And we have here to kind of receive this proclamation. We have Katie Jennifer with us. Good evening, Katie. Katie's one of our Carrboro residents. She's with the group Free Mom Hugs. And so thank you for being here to receive this.
Thank you.
All right, so this is entitled Carrboro LGBTQ Pride Month. Whereas LGBTQ Pride Month is celebrated nationally each year in the month of June. This month was chosen to commemorate the riots that took place at the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan on the morning of June 28, 1969, often viewed as the birth of the modern LGBTQ rights movement. As it is fitting that several major United States Supreme Court decisions impacting LGBTQ rights in a positive way have been announced in June. This includes Lawrence v. Texas, U.S. v. Windsor, Obergefell versus Hodges, Bostock versus Clayton County. We are awaiting another decision this month that will impact LGBTQ rights in Fulton versus City of Philadelphia. And whereas Carrboro has a proud history of advancing the rights of its LGBTQ residents, including being the first municipality in the state to create a domestic partner registry on October 11th, 1994, the first to extend eligibility for employment benefits to same-sex partners of town employees, and the first to elect a gay mayor and a lesbian mayor. Additionally, in January of this year, Carrboro was among the first local governments in the state, along with Hillsborough, Orange County, and Chapel Hill, to pass a local non-discrimination ordinance law extending protections in public accommodation and employment for persons based on their sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. And whereas, unfortunately, there's still much physical and psychological violence inflicted on LGBTQ people, both at home and abroad, there is increasing violence toward transgender women of color. There continues to be bullying and harassment of LGBTQ youth, who make up a disproportionate number of homeless youth in the United States. And the North Carolina General Assembly continues to entertain bills targeting the transgender community. And whereas Carrboro is committed to standing with and supporting the LGBTQ community and to working to ensure that all of its residents, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, are treated with respect and dignity. And whereas to recognize this special month, the town of Carrboro will have a Pride food rodeo and dance party on Thursday, June 25th at Carrboro Town Commons from 5 to 8 p.m. And this event will meet COVID safety protocols, and everyone is welcome. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carrboro, do hereby proclaim June 2021 as LGBTQ Pride Month in the town of Carrboro. I encourage all Carrboro residents to recognize and support their LGBTQ family members and neighbors and friends, and to feel free to show their pride at the food truck rodeo and dance party on Thursday, June 24. This the first day of June 2021. So, Katie, I don't know if you have any comments you want to make upon receipt of the proclamation of the town.
Sure, just a brief comment. I'm proud to receive this as the proud mama bear of 2 queer kids here in Carrboro, and I'm wearing my Free Mom Hugs shirt. which is a national organization, and I'm one of the co-leads for the North Carolina chapter for Carrboro and Chapel Hill. And our mission is to empower the world to celebrate the LGBTQIA plus community through visibility, education, and conversation, and yes, by giving hugs. And after a difficult several months of anti-trans attacks in North Carolina legislature, I'm so proud to be a resident of Carrboro, and it's the first place we've lived where I feel like my children are fully protected in all areas of their life. And I'm just so grateful to Mayor Lavelle and the whole town council for making that possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Let's see. Damon, yes?
I just want to thank Katie again, and for a few reasons. First of all, for the fact that I'm pretty sure I've received at least one mama hug from Katie. But also, in addition to being a proud parent of 2 queer kids here in Carrboro, Katie was one of several parents of queer children who appeared before a committee that was hearing testimony in the General Assembly about these horrible anti-trans bills during this session. And she spoke so incredibly well on behalf of her kids and other people in Carrboro and throughout North Carolina. That I just didn't want that to pass without being mentioned. So Katie, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for living in Carrboro.
Thanks, Damon, for bringing that up. I'm glad you did. Let's see, Susan has her hand up. Susan?
Yes, I just wanted to add thank you for being here, Katie, and for your words tonight. And also, I wanted to just say, Lydia, it was really fun seeing the video with you and Chapel Hill Council member Karen Stegman raising the pride flags in downtown Chapel Hill and downtown Carrboro. And I know that both towns are partnering a lot for small town pride events coming up. And I hope everybody will check out the town websites to learn more about them, including the Pride Food Truck Rodeo and Dance Party. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I hate that Damon was out of town when we did that. But Karen and I did that, and Kat Lazorko did a great job, I think, of putting that together. So let's see. Barbara, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so thank you, Katie, for coming in to kick off Pride Month. Happiest of Pride Month, and not just month, but day, week, year, forever, on and on. I think about, as a woman of color, about the discrimination and oppression that I sometimes encounter. And so I absolutely identify very well with the LGBTQ community, difference being, race versus sexual orientation, how you choose to live your life, who you love, and I just look at that, I'm just like, that's your business, live and let live, love thy neighbor as thyself. And so I'm just grateful that you are here with us, and we're going to celebrate all month long. Happy Pride Month.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that. Jackie, you have your hand up.
Just very quickly, thank you for being here, Katie. I remember the first Pride Parade in Carrboro, and it was very different than the most recent Pride Parade. There were some not very nice people there. And one of the businesses outside of which there was not a very nice person, and this was probably 30 years ago, has now completely changed, which is wonderful. And I remember early on, I introduced two of the first bills here in Carrboro, two of the first ordinances. And I remember all the kickback from that. And I remember thinking, this is really good for Carrboro. And I think one of the reasons why we're such a successful town is that people who feel safe and welcomed and supported come here and they contribute to the community. And I think that our community would not be who and what it is now if we hadn't 30 years ago decided that we're going to be a place where everybody feels safe and welcome. But I want to thank our whole LGBTQ community for making Carrboro what it is today. Carrboro wouldn't be Carrboro without our pride parades and without our pride flags. So thank you, and thank you for bringing your children to us.
Thanks, Jackie. Susan, your hand's up from earlier. Is it okay? A few ways ago. Oh, and I want to mention one more thing, y'all, because Randy can't be here. Randy's helping put together, on the heels of her Earth Day food truck rodeo, she's agreed to take on helping organize this Pride food truck rodeo. So I hope we're all going to be able to make it there and invite everyone we know to kind of attend it that day. Sammy, did I see your hand up, or did you?
Yeah, just very briefly, because everyone's spoken, and there's not much else for me to say other than express gratitude to Katie, and just I second everything that everybody said. I totally agree. I'm very glad to be serving on a council for a town that is open in so many ways, and hopefully leading in the right direction and modeling for other places on how to be.
Thank you. Thanks, Sammy. And Katie, thanks for being here again. We appreciate it. So, all right, folks, we're moving on to our next proclamation, which is...
Lydia, I'm sorry, and before you get started in your next proclamation. So you said June 24th on a Thursday, right? Is that?
Yeah, Thursday's when the food truck rodeo is, yeah.
Thanks.
Our next proclamation is Immigrant Heritage Month. And we have a couple of guests with us here tonight to accept this proclamation. We've got Maddie Hayes with us. And I think we also are, let's see. Kathy, I know we had extended an invitation.
Yes, and we sent the link out today, but I'm only seeing Maddie. I'm not seeing.
We also had invited Flicka
Bateman.
Right, from the refugee.
Look, if you're in the audience, if you could raise your hand, I can see the participants list.
But I know that Eleazar wasn't able to join us tonight, but
right.
Maddie did, as she has done in previous years. So, but let me go ahead and I'd like to read this proclamation. Immigrant Heritage Month. Whereas generations of immigrants from all around the world have built our country's economy and created the unique character of our nation, and immigrants continue to grow businesses, innovate, and strengthen our economy. And whereas immigrants have provided the United States with unique social and cultural influence, fundamentally enriching the extraordinary character of our nation. And whereas immigrants have been leaders, not only in securing their own rights and access to equal opportunity, but have campaigned to create a more fair and just society for all Americans. And whereas despite the contributions of our immigrant community, the role of immigrants in building and enriching our nation has been frequently overlooked and undervalued throughout our history and continuing to the present day. And whereas this last year of the COVID-19 pandemic has been particularly challenging for our immigrant community, and our town council and town staff have tried to work to mitigate these challenges and support these community members. And whereas the town of Carrboro is very appreciative of local nonprofits and other groups that work with our immigrant community, including those that come to our nation and community specifically to seek refuge. These groups include El Centro Hispano, the Refugee Community Partnership, and the Refugee Support Center. And whereas instead of targeting and harassing our immigrant community, we choose instead to honor and support and do whatever we can to keep safe these members of our community. Now, therefore, be resolved, I, Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carrboro, do hereby proclaim June 2021 as Immigrant Heritage Month in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to respect and honor the many contributions that immigrants have made in our community and country. This is the first day of June 2021. And thank you, Maddie, so much for being here and representing your work. Would you like to say a few words to us?
Yeah, thanks to all of you for recognition tonight. It's getting to work with the town of Carrboro is always a really heartening partnership for us, especially over the last year. The sociocultural moment that I think we've been experiencing over the last year and a half, which is not new and is not, especially not new to the last year and a half, but put on the national stage a conversation about systemic racism, the scale of which is the first in my lifetime. And as we know, the American immigration system has always been intertwined with anti-Black and brown racism, right? And so the movement for liberation, the movement for racial justice is deeply, deeply embedded in also how we carry out our efforts around housing safety, around economic justice, around language access, and partnership with the town of Carrboro moves us toward that. In the last year, especially conversations with town of Carrboro staff has been awesome, particularly around language access and language justice. And coming from a place not of what are our liability compliance? Are we meeting our liability compliance needs, around language access, but a true orientation to authentic relationship between municipal government and communities that speak primary languages other than English, right? And that's the kind of cultural orientation that's needed. So thanks to all of you for the proclamation tonight, for the recognition, and for having us here. It's so good to see all of you.
Thanks, Maddie. Thank you for being here. We were happy you were able to make it. And then I see we also have Flicka Bateman here, made it to join us. We were trying to get you on as I was reading the proclamation, recognizing Immigrant Heritage Month and recognizing that people come here for different reasons, and just recognizing the culture and the achievements of our immigrants. And we'd like to have you just, respond a little bit and give us your thoughts if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Council. Hi, Maddie. I appreciate the honor of your designation, and I think it's very appropriate that you chose June, because June 20th is the United Nations designated World Refugee Day, held annually. This is the 70th year it will be celebrated, because it commemorates the opening day of the Geneva Convention, which was signed in 1951, recognized and defined the status of refugees, as well as the responsibilities of host nations. I don't need to tell this community what the responsibilities are. You are welcoming a group as I think anyone could wish for. I like to think that when we get donations, when we give out food, when we distributed meals, when we distribute school supplies, that we're also distributing community goodwill. And that's to a population that doesn't always receive that. So thank you for what you do for our refugee population.
Thank you. Thanks, Flicka. You guys each had such great comments. They complement each other very well. So we appreciate you both being here as I read this. Council members, you want to give a wave to our folks here, or I don't know if anyone wants to say any comments or anything. Oh, thank you both for being here. We're going to move on to our next proclamation, but thanks for what you do. All right, our last proclamation, June's a big month. Our last proclamation, y'all, is Gun Violence Awareness Day. And I believe we have, is it Tony Cope is here?
We have Tony Cope.
Okay. Let's see.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation about Gun Violence Awareness Day. And then if you'd like to speak, to us, you're welcome. So, whereas every day, more than 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, alongside more than 230 who are shot and wounded. On average, there are more than 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other high-income countries, and North Carolina has an average of 1,388 gun deaths every year, a rate of 13.3 deaths per 100,000 people. North Carolina had the 23rd highest rate of gun deaths in the U.S. Whereas gun homicides and assaults are concentrated in cities with more than half of all firearm-related gun deaths in the nation occurring in 127 cities, and cities and towns across the nation, including Carrboro, are working to end this senseless violence with evidence-based solutions. And whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories, gun violence prevention is more important than ever as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to exacerbate gun violence after more than a year of increased gun sales, increased calls to suicide and domestic violence hotlines, and an increase in city gun violence. And whereas in January 2013, Hadia Pendleton was tragically shot and killed at age 15, on June 4, 2021, to recognize the 24th birthday of Hadia Pendleton, people across the United States will recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day and wear orange in tribute to 1, Hadia Pendleton and other victims of gun violence, and 2, the loved ones of those victims. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadia's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters while out in the woods. Orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 4th, the first Friday in June, to help raise awareness about gun violence. And by wearing orange on that day, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. And whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carrboro, do hereby declare the first Friday in June, June 4th, 2021, to be Gun Violence Awareness Day. I encourage all residents to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. This, the first day of June, 2021. I don't really want to clap with this, but I will say this is a really important recognition that we have done for many years in the town of Carrboro. We'll be putting up our orange flags this weekend to kind of supplement and recognize this kind of nationwide movement. Tony, we welcome your comments about the proclamation. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love everything, and I love sharing the stage with two other such excellent proclamations tonight. You said most of everything that I would have said in a prepared speech. Just information on me. I am a gun violence survivor. My family and I have survived 2 active shooter events in our own little town, and I'm currently volunteering as the co-lead for the North Carolina chapter of Moms Demand Action. We're the largest, part of the largest grassroots nationwide gun violence prevention group in the country. And like you said, we wear orange to honor victims and survivors of gun violence and call attention to this uniquely American problem, to educate each other on how do we move forward together to find solutions. By this proclamation, Carrboro joins cities and towns across North Carolina and across the United States, affirming our community's shared responsibility towards each other's health and safety. And I think, I hope we can all find ways to work together to educate our community about gun violence and gun safety, keep firearms away from children, especially, and also those who would not use them responsibly. So if anybody is interested to find out more about the specific Wear Orange, you can go to wearorange.com to find information.
Thank you, Tony. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
We're aware of this because we light up orange early June every year, and so we will be out there wearing orange and trying to spread the word. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, council members, before we go on to our announcement of upcoming meetings, I know Barbara, you wanted to make an announcement, a recognition, I should say.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lavelle. So let me just preface by saying this is not only Black history, it actually is American history. I did want to acknowledge the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre in the prosperous Greenwood District. A sin that has not been atoned for, virtually wiped from history, so it didn't matter. No one charged in multiple mass grave sites. So for those of you that don't know, I think all of you are probably fairly familiar, but I just want to just give some background. The massacre took place over 2 days, from May 31st to June 1st in the year 1921, when mobs of white residents, many of them deputized and given weapons by city officials, attacked Black residents and burned businesses of the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Alternatively known as the Black Wall Street Massacre or the Tulsa Race Riot, it marks one of the single worst incidents of racial violence in American history. The attack, carried out on the ground and from private aircraft, destroyed more than 35 square blocks of the district. At that time, the wealthiest Black community in the United States, known as Black Wall Street. About 10,000 Black people were left homeless, and property damage amounted to more than $1.5 million in real estate and $750,000 in personal property, which is equivalent to $32.65 million in the year 2020. Many survivors left Tulsa, while Black and white residents who stayed in the city kept silent about the terror, violence, and resulting losses for decades. The massacre was largely omitted from local, state, and national histories. I just ask that we continue to bring history forth as the past definitely dictates the present and the future. I ask that we continue to shine the light on not only this injustice, but all injustices, and really work to right some of these wrongs from years ago. And certainly wanted to acknowledge this important anniversary again and the continuing need to address the wealth gap in a meaningful and thoughtful way. And last but not least, always be willing to connect the dots, because this is definitely a case where you can, like connect the dots from what happened in the year 1921 over that period of 2 days. Stuff like this is still happening. It's not as blatant as like burning down like 35 city blocks, but certainly in more subtle or overt ways. And I appreciate Mayor Lavelle allowing time for this acknowledgement. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Barbara. I've been, as I'm sure others have, been reading articles the last couple of days and seeing like different things like the president today. Something that struck me as kind of remarkable was that there were 3 survivors that are still, being recognized from that horrific event. And they have, I imagine they never thought that they would kind of see at least some of what's going on today in terms of the visibility, which is really good. All right, so council members, let's see. We're going to go ahead and move on to announcement of upcoming meetings, and then we're going to look at public comment. I know we have a couple of people signed up to speak, so.
All right, Mayor and Council, between now and your next town council meeting, the Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee, the Environmental Advisory Board, the Appearance Commission, the Planning Board, and the Transportation Advisory Board will all meet on June 3rd. The Carrboro Tourism Development Authority meeting will be held on June 7th. And then you all will meet again on June the 8th. And I just wanted to go ahead and say now, I think you're going to have a special meeting on Sunday and Monday to go into closed session. So you want to talk about that now and get those times, and that would be great, or you can wait till the end and decide how you want to handle that.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I wrote a little note. So at the very end of this meeting, what we do instead of adjourning is we'll make a motion to continue our meeting to Sunday. And I'm not sure if it's going to be Sunday at noon or Sunday at 1. So maybe you can find out what time it is, Kathy, when we get closer to that time.
Julie let me know that it was going to be at 12. So you'll begin at 12 o'clock on Sunday.
Okay. All right. That's what we thought that might be the case. So, all right. Well, so we'll make that motion, y'all, at the end of this meeting. So,
do we know what time on Monday?
Well, we know we're starting. We know we discussed starting at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock on Monday.
Yeah. So I think the plan was to do that. So, okay. In terms of public comment, I know we have a couple of people here to sign up on a matter that's not on the printed agenda. We have, let's start first, I guess, with Diane Newton. Kathy?
Hi, it's Diana.
Hi. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Diana. And I should know that because we've been getting emails from you. And Diana, you have a soft 3 minutes to chat with us, but thank you for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm speaking to you not only as an individual resident of Bardell neighborhood, but as a representative of the prevailing experiences and sentiments that we have with regard to the long-term stormwater management issue, which I think is really problematic. It's not on the agenda every time. And the short-term traffic calming measures, which have only come up because, we chased them down. Our experience is not the heartening partnership that Maddie Hayes just extolled, and nor have we had awesome conversations with the staff. Our experience is one in which, upon analysis of our neighborhood listserv, I did a word cloud, and the biggest words, that pop up in the graphic are non-responsive, avoidant, distracting, deflecting, and failing. Our experience is that the town of Carrboro spends a lot of time studying and planning rather than doing meaningful implementation with regard to the priorities of our neighborhood, and we're tired of it. And I've expressed this to several of you on behalf of the neighborhood, not just as one homeowner with, compared to many, a lesser flooding problem, but one that's very real to me. Upon review of the proposed budget, we find it inadequate that there has been only a slight increase of $23,000 to address stormwater infrastructure issues, while parking is getting a $56,000 increase. That is ludicrous. I got a report from the staff, which included fascinating chronology documents related to the Toms Creek issues I'm describing. There are no entries on the chronology document since 2012. The map has no notes since 1999, while the updated memo from a few days ago notes the most reports of flooding concerns in Carrboro come from Toms Creek. So, just want you to know that the conclusion overall we're drawing is that the stormwater issues are long-term, difficult, and expensive. We know that. We know that you know that. And the message we get is that the town will offer consultation and tools that will tell us, the residents, how to fix and pay for these issues, many of which Carrboro, the town, is responsible for. It's unacceptable, and we're going to hold you accountable. We're forming a neighborhood alliance, and we're going to be unrelenting in pressuring you for getting our needs met based on the tax dollars we contribute and for which we are not receiving sufficient services. Thank you.
Diana, thank you for coming to speak with us. I know I've seen several recent emails from you and from the neighborhood association and the folks I assume are going to rally around this. I'm aware of, some correspondence from our town manager, from Trish in recent days, kind of explaining the long history and then the history, I think, of our new stormwater management program, which has been underway for the last, I'd say, 3 years. I don't have that right in front of me. I know we could address. Okay. But in any event, I know that that's the way that staff and the manager responded. I'm sorry it was taken to be non-responsive or to be, I'm sorry that the neighbors.
No, we're talking about 30 years worth of non-responsiveness. We're not talking about this last week and my emails. Let me just be clear.
Right. I wasn't talking about the last week, but I was talking about the last several years when I've been on the council, when I've been mayor, and we've worked to create this stormwater management program and been out there on many occasions and trying to put something in place that can, address these long-standing issues that all of the homeowners out there have had for years, some of which have.
And for which we have not seen action. Yeah. We've had lots of walkarounds.
Yeah. So I don't know if I can have Mr. Manager respond to this, but I don't know if any other council members would like to respond to Diana initially.
I can just make this one other note. David Andrews, the town manager, said that he thought this was a case of misunderstood expectations. And when I pointed out where the expectations came from, item 12 on the stormwater management website page, the next day, the website page was changed. So I wonder if overnight there was a policy change. Seems, interesting to me. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the specific page you're talking about. I mean, which page? But so, council members, does anyone else have a response for Diana or Mr. Manager? I don't know if you have anything that you want to say in response to Ms. Newton's comments or staff responses of late.
David, go ahead. I was going to say something, but David, you go ahead.
No, Barbara, you can go ahead if you like. I would defer to you.
Oh, okay.
Let's go with Barbara first.
Hey, Diana. I think you and I spoke on the phone, and I understand very well what you meant when you were like, "Hey, no more words." It's time for action, and I felt everything that you were saying, and I know for myself, the town manager will present his recommended budget for the town. It's later on the agenda, and one of the things that, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it now, we talk about priorities, and all of us, I think, want to do what's needed in the community, for our residents, and we talk about priorities. But then when I think about, our budget, which needs to be reflective of those priorities, of which one is stormwater management, along with some other things, we have some other things, climate change mitigation, affordable housing, just to name a few. And so, I was going to talk about this later on, but I did want to say it now while you were still in the Zoom meeting with us. And I do believe that my colleagues, in town staff share the concern, but us as policy makers, the council, we can't keep saying it's a priority, and we understand about the process, and how things flow, but community is asking, right? And we're thank you. And so we're in this budget cycle. We do have the stormwater enterprise fund, but is that really enough to hit the mark? And I mean, those were my comments, and I'm not saying that to deflect or anything, because I feel like folks are working hard, but are we really like hitting the mark that we need to be hitting with this item?
Thanks, Barbara. I was looking for the amount, the budget, the Stormwater Utility Enterprise Fund. It's almost $1 million. And I know we've had a lot of discussion on this council about how to allocate those money in certain ways to try to address the various goals that Randy has kind of shown us that that Stormwater Enterprise has been set up to achieve. And I know that we often talk about that, how much of that goes toward on the ground repairs, but it has to be in light of all these unfortunately studies, right, that happen to kind of say where we get the most bang for our buck in terms of stopping water that's going downstream or going in the neighborhoods. So when we get to this, let's
stormwater infrastructure project on slate for 2021. I don't even know where that is. I doubt it's here.
All right, let's get a comment here from Mr. Manager. And then if other council members don't have any further comments, we will take your comments under advisement again, Diana, and thank you. But let's hear from David.
Okay, Mayor, so I'll make a comment. In the interest of time, it's not an agenda item here.
Oh.
I'll just remind you of that. But Ms. Newton mentioned earlier about priorities and changes in budget. For the 21-22 budget, which is coming up next, the stormwater utility is $971,000, and parking is, and I'll use parking since Ms. Newton made a reference to parking, but it's $250,000. So as an expression of priorities, the stormwater budget is 4 times the parking budget for 21-22, as you'll see in the next agenda item. So I want to make sure that's clear. And I've mentioned, before that we have to have realistic expectations. And unfortunately, I would consider flooding and hurricanes and those kinds of things an act of God. And we can only move water around in so many places. And as you've heard before, to take water from one place only creates a problem in another place.
So you have no solutions.
We have laid out in a study by Sungate what options that we might have. And I will say that it is unrealistic to expect that when rain comes down, and that is fact-based.
There are 4 on your map that was provided, and the experience of the homeowner who was the subject of one of those said, I have issues left from that. Been writing to them, calling nonstop. The phrase, I should have more for you next week, needs to be engraved above the doors of town hall.
Right. Okay, Ms. Newton, thank you. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate you bringing this to us again, reminding us of this again, you and your neighbors. Mr. Manager, thank you. I appreciate your remarks and your response. But as we need to go ahead and move on to the rest of our agenda items here, including the budget, which includes the Stormwater Utility Enterprise Fund. So we'll thank you for being here. All right, let's move on to our next person who has a public comment for us on a matter not on the printed agenda. Elizabeth Youssef.
That's right. Elizabeth, if you could raise your hand so I could see your name.
I don't see anyone raising their
I
hand.
don't see them.
Okay. All right. So, Elizabeth apparently is not here. And then I think the last 3 that at least I have on my list of speakers look to be speakers that are going to talk to us about either the budget or the discussion that we're having around the American Rescue Plan Act. And that's Minister Campbell and Karen Kincaid and Paula Harrington. So is that what your records reflect, Kathy?
That's correct. Karen Kincaid has requested that she make her comments now during this portion of the meeting.
All right. Karen, is this about the budget or about the agenda item that we're going over later?
They are. I'm not sure her schedule.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and bring Karen.
Okay, bringing her over.
Karen, are you
I'm
there?
here.
Yeah. So normally we would have you speak on the item as we get to the item, but you must have a conflict tonight and need to go ahead and go now. Is that?
I have had a long I know everybody has, but I need sleep.
Okay. All right. No problem. No problem. I just wanted to make sure that you were speaking about this item that we're talking about later.
Yes, the American Rescue Act.
Right. And you have your soft 3 minutes, but go right ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I plan to offer a more detailed comments related to the American Rescue Plan Act. However, I think I'll be better prepared to make more informed comments after I learn more about tonight's presentation. In the meantime, just please keep Club Nova in mind for funds from this program. I mean, we would clearly benefit from funds to offset the losses that we've incurred from Medicaid and state revenues since March 2020. And as you're aware, we're replacing 2 outdated, inadequate buildings with a new facility that will have much improved air quality, ventilation, and other systems. If these type of expenditures are eligible for the rescue funds, we hope that Club Nova will be considered. And final comment, I'm happy to announce that Club Nova began our in-person soft reopening to members today in our transition space over in Chapel Hill. And just for health and safety reasons, we could not have had this reopening in our previous old buildings. So I look forward to learning more about the Rescue Act. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that update. And that's really great news too. I didn't aware of that. So that's awesome. Okay. So then moving on now, Mr. Manager, to the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. You have 3 items on the consent agenda. The first item is approval of the meeting minutes from May the 11th with changes as offered by Councilmember Romaine. The second item is a recognition of the Carrboro Civic Club for the donation of the facilities at 108 Bim Street. And then the last item is appointments to the Board of Adjustment, and that would appoint the resolution would appoint Linda Bowerman, Brian Hageman, Sriv Navaratnam, Marcus Page, and Thomas Tyman, as well as recommend the appointment of John Baker by the Orange County Board of Commissioners. Mayor.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry if someone would pull the notes. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. I'm sorry. Jackie.
I'd like to pull item number 2, and with that, I'll move item number 3.
Okay, all right. So motion by you, and then I saw Barbara's hand up after I called on you. Barbara, did you have anything else to pull, or do you mind seconding Jackie's?
No, I was trying to move all of it, but I
know. Okay, all right. So we got one of them moved. Was it number 3? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so motion for number 3. All in favor, say aye. Damon.
Aye.
Barbara.
Aye.
Jackie.
Aye.
Me, aye. Susan?
Aye.
And Sammy?
Aye.
Okay, very good. And then so we'll bring back the minutes next time. And then Jackie, you want to talk about the item, the recognition of the Carrboro Civic Club.
Just very quickly. I thought that, we had asked for a history of the club, and I think that's a good history and shows really great work they've done, including supporting the IFC and lots of other organizations. I think the resolution's a little slim. So what I'd like to ask is that the history, when we send it, and we can send like a hard copy, that we send the history along with it, and maybe amend the resolution to somehow include the history in it, because the history's so nice.
If we're going to amend it, then I would suggest we just have it back on consent next week to approve as amended, the history incorporated in it.
Yes.
Susan's got her hand up. Susan?
Yes, if we were going to amend it, I was curious, and David, this question may be directed at you. I was curious if you have a sense of how that building will be used, if it will continue to be used as sort of gathering space for civic groups. And if so, that would be a nice thing to include in the resolution, that we, the town would like to continue on with the tradition that the Carrboro Civic Club has established over many, many years.
I think I don't mean to jump on top of David, but I think we had a discussion that we would all talk when we return in September about different ideas about how that space might be used. And so I guess it's premature to say how it'll be used. Is that right, David?
Yeah, I would agree. I think public gathering spaces, but yeah, we were going to bring that back in September. We wanted to get this recognition of acknowledgement and appreciation to the Civic Club before your summer break.
So is that good, Susan? Does that end?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I see Barbara's hand up.
Oh, I'm over here like I don't know how to unmute myself. Sorry. And so I like Jackie's idea, and what I was thinking for it not to maybe be too long is to like Jackie, you're talking about like the complete history or just like
just some of the history, kind of recognizing all the contributions that they made over the years,
like some of the
text from that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or some of the groups they supported, which I think is really, really neat.
And that's the part, I like is like who they collaborated with along with some of the things they've done in the community. So yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks, Barbara. So Kathy, is it possible for us to have that reworked just a little to incorporate that history into the resolution and then have it come back to us on like next week?
Yes, absolutely.
Robert's
Thank you.
Okay.
You got Bobby with you, don't you?
He's been waving to you all. He's asking, why are they waving back?
I see a hand. I see a hand coming up your arm.
We see your finger.
They're waving to you, buddy.
All right, very good. So we'll have to come back then next week on the consent agenda. So
thank you.
All right. Okay, and just like that, we're back on schedule. So all right, Mr. Manager, next item.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The next item on your agenda is the presentation of the manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 21-22. I'm going to do the dangerous task of being in charge of technology and make a PowerPoint. Arch is on standby in case there's any technical difficulties. I want you to know I've got Big Arch waiting in the wings in case there's a problem. So I'll get her fired off here. Just give me 1 second. I think I can do this. Let's see. Okay. So can everyone see that? Does that look good?
Yeah, we can see it just fine.
All right. So I'm going to, you've seen this before. This is an abbreviated version of what we did in the one-on-one meetings. But it's still, comprehensive, and just feel free to jump in with any questions as we go through it. And of course, there'll be plenty of conversation at the end, I'm sure. So with that, we'll start off, and we'll start with saying that the, similar to years past, the goals of developing the budget would be to implement the council's strategic priorities. I think once you have a comprehensive plan adopted, we'll then connect the goals to the comprehensive plan to be a little bit more specific. Always controlling costs, a balanced budget. And as I mentioned before, I think that for the long run in the future, renovation of town facilities should be a high priority for the town of Carrboro. The recommended budget is $71.7 million, $25 million in the general fund, almost $42 million worth of capital. I mentioned stormwater is $971, parking enterprise $290, and special revenue funds, which are more like your affordable housing, your energy efficiency loans, economic development loans, also the $900,000 CDBG. Those are all components of the special revenue fund. The general fund revenue budget is, $25,077,000. That is, I wanted to say that's $24.2 million in revenue, a fund balance of $919,000 for a total of $25,077. And I wanted to point out that property taxes make up 58% of the town's revenue base. Sales taxes make up 20%. So between property and sales, those two make up 78% of the town's revenue budget, and extremely significant and important to the town. In terms of property tax revenues, we are recommending a 1/2 cent increase in the property tax rate for affordable housing. This would be the third installment of the penny and a half for affordable housing. As you know, we didn't increase the rate for 2021, but we're recommending going ahead and doing that for 21-22. That would make the total rate 58.94 cents for the general fund and a penny and a half for the affordable housing, for a total of 60.44 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. And I did a little research over the weekend and wanted to point out that that the rate of 58 cents and 58.94 cents was established in 2011. And so this would be the 11th year that that rate has not increased, other than the penny and a half for affordable housing. I think that's really important to note. We've had a great sales tax history, as you know, with the pandemic. In 2021, we were a little over $500,000 short, off the previous year. We're projecting that we'll make that up, and then an increase of $653,000 for 21-22. And I also wanted to point out that the sales taxes have increased 57% from 2011 through 21-22. So 57% over 11 years, a little about 5% a year, which has been really pretty good. We've had a good run on sales taxes. And again, that's 28% of your total revenue sources. General fund expenses, we're coming out of the pandemic. As I mentioned, we're looking at, recommending that we lift the hiring freeze and restore each department to its previous pre-pandemic staffing capacity. And I would say that despite that, we're only looking at a 0.1% increase in general fund expenses for 21-22. We really scaled back in 2021, and we are looking at coming out of it, but we have recognized some efficiencies along the way through some reorganizations and the like. Mentioned about the number of personnel. What we have projected a recommended increase of 2 positions in general government, that being 1 position for the IT department, a half a position for housing, and a half a position in communications, and then a reduction based on the suggestion by Joe Guckavan to consolidate some divisions and reduce the public works by 2 for a net change of 0. And again, I went back to 2012, the year that I started, and we had 156 full-time equivalents in 2012. So we've been pretty sparse. We've added 12 and a half positions in 10 years. And those 12 and a half positions include 3 and a half positions in stormwater and 3 in housing. So a little bit over half of those positions have been related to some new services that we've added within the past 10 years. Wanted to make sure that you know that when we did some of the one-on-ones, that the strategic initiatives that you indicated are very important to you and the community are funded, are included in the budget. The inclusive Carrboro, the continuation of the comprehensive plan. We talked about affordable housing. We talked about 203, the town facilities. We funded $20,000 to $25,000 for GARE. It's a very important priority, high priority for the council and community. The community climate action plan. you're familiar with with changes in our employee health insurance and also a continuation of stormwater management. We are recommending a 2.9% salary adjustment for town employees. And I'll just go to the next chart if you don't have a pointer. But if you look at the bottom of the chart for 2021, the consumer price index was 2.1%, and it's been forecasted to be 1.2% for 21-22 for a total of 3.3. So we recommended 2.9, and I'll say that during the one-on-one meetings with the council members, there were a couple of council members that wanted to throw out the idea of rather than a 2.9% salary increase, that we make that 3.3%. If that's something that you want to consider, the total cost of that delta between the 2.9 and the 3.3 would be about $45,000, and that's something that you may want to discuss later or not. I think we went into quite a bit of detail about the nonstop wellness, the changeover to a high deductible. I want to compliment the Human Resources Department and Finance for working through this issue. It decreased the cost of health insurance for the town by $546,000, which is quite significant, which would be the equivalent of 2 cents on the property tax rate. We think it offers the same benefits. We're still staying with Blue Cross Blue Shield. It has the same benefits. It just really changes the way that the deductibles are paid. And I want to switch to the next slide and show that in addition to the maximum out of pocket for anybody under the plan would be $1,000 a year. But in addition, I think that's a little bit less than what we've had before. But I also wanted to point out that change will save the employees that have spouse, children, or family coverage. They will save anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 a year in their premium contributions. So we feel like it's a win-win for the employees in terms of what their out-of-pocket premiums will be, and also a win for the town in that the town will save about $546,000. And I just looked up and saw Barbara's hand, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, David. So while we're on this slide, impact on employee costs, I know that the town is, it's decreasing the cost by $546,612. And you talked about some of a few of the employee advantages. I was wondering if you want to speak a little bit more on that and just kind of expand that, and also the response, from employees. Is this the first time it's being seen? I feel like information's been rolled out to them already, right?
Right. We've already started open enrollment. And I don't know, Kathy, if Kathy, you can check and see if Julie's on, but I haven't heard any negative feedback so far. But it is a different way of doing things than what we've done in the past. Is Kathy? Go ahead.
I'm not seeing her, David.
I'm sorry.
I'm
Kathy?
not seeing her. Just let me check and see if it's one of the town of Carrboro accounts.
Okay.
Kathy, we can hear from Julie at the end of the presentation.
Right.
Just make sure she knows Barbara's question and she can address it then.
And David, could you flip back to the slide just previous to this one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
And I've seen all this before. Is there anything else that you want to specifically point out as far as being more beneficial than the original plan as far as the employee is concerned?
I think,
or pretty much this is what we have here. I didn't know if you had anything else. That's all.
Well, I think that, in other words, instead of paying your co-pays, say $40 for a prescription, or, your co-pay for a doctor's visit, you pay that incrementally as you needed needed to, whereas now you'll use your preloaded debit card, and in the end it's $7,000, but once you spend that, then you'll be paying $1,000 out of pocket. So it's a little bit different in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the overall deductible is actually lower under this plan, so that benefits the employee. And then, of course, if you have any type of dependent coverage, you're going to more than make that up over a reduction in premiums. The Blue, what we don't show here is that when we originally talked to Blue Cross Blue Shield, they quoted us like an 18 or 19% rate increase for 21-22. I think we had that down to about 10%. So that is not reflected in the savings. Had we just stayed with the status quo, the premiums would have gone up another 10%. So employees with family coverage, they might have gotten a raise of 2.9% or whatnot, but some of that would have been eaten up in health insurance premium. So, okay, good. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. And again, the coverage is the same. We've asked that question multiple times. It is the same coverage as you have under the existing Blue Cross plan, and we're still going with Blue Cross. This is just what's called a high deductible plan. Okay, so moving on to community funding, very similar to what you've seen in the past. The Art Center, Human Services, El Centro, and just wanted to point out that on the Orange County Food Council, their contract expired on March 31st of this year, and so you will be seeing you'll have an agenda item for the renewal of that contract. The Affordable Housing Fund, this was reviewed by the Affordable Housing Advisory Commission, and this is their recommendation on the line items for their budget for 21-22. Moving on to recreation and parks, we're fully funding all the community events, and in the event that there's some kind of change in COVID or whatnot, we're still prepared to go live, but we're going to do as much in person as we can, and that's something that Anita and her team are working on. I did want to point out that when you in your next item under the American Rescue Plan, we are assuming here that the Carrboro Tourism Development Authority will fund 100% of the music festival, film festival, Poetry Alive, and Freight Train Blues, and that is dependent upon us using the American Rescue Plan funds to do revenue replacement to the TDA, because their revenues were off by about 80% in 2021 due to the pandemic. So that's something that we'll take up in the next item, but we are assuming that if they don't get that revenue replacement, they will not be able to fully fund these programs like they have in the past. In terms of economic development, we've got, of course, the revolving loan fund, the energy efficiency loan. I just wanted to point out and remind you that when we did the COVID grants or COVID loans, it was partial grant and loan. We did 18, and with a total outstanding loan balance of $329,936. And that's something that when we get again to the American Rescue Plan, we can talk about. That might be an idea of loan forgiveness. That's one possible option for that, or not, depending on what you all are thinking along those lines, or maybe another round of grants. So we'll see. I don't want to mix agenda items because this is the budget, a separate item. Community Climate Action Plan, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've done in the past. Energy efficiency every other week, organic waste. Chapel Hill Transit, we've actually have a reduction in our payment for 21-22 based on what we've been told so far. And I think you all have a copy of this. I'm not going to go through the line items, but this is the what we thought would be a good idea for community climate, because we have one person, Laura Janway, that we needed to just have a work plan for each year so that to try to create some focus on what we really need to work on or what we can given the resources that we have. So that's the work plan there. As I mentioned before, I think the capital improvement budget is about $42 million. We're moving forward with the fiber installation for South Greensboro as part of the 203 project. Also wanted to talk about, we mentioned initiatives or priorities, community engagement, the minority-owned business scholarships, criminal justice fund. We didn't fund the biennial citizen survey. It would have happened in 2021, but we put it on hold. So we're talking about doing that in 21-22. The community garden fence and greenhouse, we had to cut that out of the 2021 budget due to the pandemic. We're talking about putting the funding back in. Local elections for the November election, and then the Orange County living wage, which I believe is, I think it's $15.40. So we have that in there. More capital projects, just 203. We're talking about the Anderson and Wilson Parks parking lots desperately need repaving. We're looking at doing that. The Jones Ferry Road retaining wall, which I think is falling down. East Main restriping, and then some renovations to the 108 Bim Street property that was donated. Sidewalks and greenways, continuing on with those. Vehicles and equipment. We try to replace 6 vehicles per year in the police department. One of the big ones is the fire engine 931. Typically, a fire engine lasts about 20 years. There's a 1 year lead on build because you don't just walk in and buy a fire truck. It takes them a year to build that, and so as you order it, so even if we ordered it today, it wouldn't still be ready until about a year from now, but we would pay that out of 21-22 budget, and by the time that's replaced, I think it'll be 23 or 24 years old. And then we have some other equipment in public works. Debt service has gone down again because of just the long-term debt on fire station number 2, as well as our lease purchasing. I want to say that for stormwater, I mentioned it, $971,000 and $250,000 for parking. And I will just say for the record and then move on that I truly am sorry that we have never been able to match the expectations of the folks in Bard Owl. We certainly hasn't been for lack of trying, and it's complicated. You don't just get rid of water; it moves from one place to the next. But those are the 2 enterprise funds. We're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan in the next budget item. Again, so I won't spend too much time on that, but I did want to mention that. And last week you received the budget. It's being presented tonight. I think because of scheduling, Lydia, maybe you can answer this. We may not have a public hearing on the 8th, but maybe move that to the 15th because you may need to have a closed session for your manager recruitment. But then, of course, June the 22nd is scheduled for final budget adoption. And that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll talk about that schedule. I think we'll keep it the way it is right now, David. But I know we're looking for a time when we can get together and talk a little bit about the search. And we may do that at the end of one of our next 2 meetings, y'all, but we'll figure that out among ourselves. Before I go on to Jackie and then Susan, I wanted to say a couple quick things. One is we have 3 people in the audience that would like to speak to us. Campbell, Paula Harrington, and Katie Luvis. And I just wanted to tell those 3 folks, we're happy to hear from you like right now. That would be my suggestion, council members, if they want to hear hear from them now. Or if you all want, after this, we're having an item where we're going to learn about the American Rescue Plan Act. Like, we're going to get the information from the town manager and just kind of, brainstorm ourselves too and get information. But we also have a public hearing next week where folks from the public can talk about either of those items to us. So just wanted to kind of put that out there because I'm not sure how long some of you want to stay with us, but also just to know that I think our presentation, our comments, our conversation right now, and the next presentation might inform comments that some of you might want to give us next week. Also, kind of like what Karen does at the beginning. So, members, my suggestion is before we get into kind of the weeds about some questions we have about this, to see if the three folks I mentioned, if they want to speak right now first before we all start talking. Is that okay with everyone? A little thumbs up with that. Okay. So, Kathy, are you out there? And Mr. Manager, you might want to just stop sharing your screen for a minute here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just bring all three of them over so that they're ready.
Okay, so I know we have, it looks like we have Katie first, and then we'll go to the other two as they get over. And then I know Jackie and Susan, I've got you guys ready to tee it up to go once we get back to people. So Katie, thanks for being here. And speakers, y'all have kind of a soft 3 minutes as usual, but feel free to go ahead and start.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I guess I'll take this as an organic conversation, and perhaps based on staff feedback, the CBA's input might adjust in the next week, but here's what I know for you. So in April, the Chamber implemented a business needs assessment survey to better understand the needs of our local business community, including businesses in Carrboro. And the survey unpacked two main questions, and more than 100 employers responded. The first question was, what do you need most in order to survive and thrive in the next 6 months? The number one response from local employers was grants, not loans, but grants. The second question was, what is the most significant challenge to the future growth and survival of your organization? And the top response was marketing assistance. Local businesses could use support reaching potential customers. And in fact, most respondents, 69%, affirmed this need. The second highest response had to do with talent, recruiting, training, and retaining workers so that the business can get back to full operations. 35% of respondents affirmed this need. The CBA Marketing Committee, we met last week with John Hartman Brown, and the CBA validated these survey findings from the Chamber, that grants would indeed be the biggest way to help right now in the next 6 months, and that marketing and talent challenges were indeed obstacles. CBA members also offered a third area of focus where they could use support, and that was in capital improvements. And one example of many during that meeting was from one of our deli owners who said that additional funds for capital improvements would allow her to afford a new refrigerator that they've long needed. So I want to thank the mayor and the manager and John Hartman Brown for reaching out to the CBA for input in this regard. And as you have your conversations, I encourage you to remember your local business community in your long-term recovery planning. Consider small business grants as a vehicle for support, and consider focusing those grants on the areas local businesses have identified as high needs: marketing, talent, and capital improvements. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Katie. And yeah, feel free to come back next week after the conversation or as the week ensues if you have more to bring us from our CBA. So we've got Minister Campbell, and then we have Ms. Harrington after that. So Minister Campbell, it's nice to see you out here, sir. Minister Campbell, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start off with you, and then after you, then we'll go on to Ms. Harrington. So go ahead and feel free to start whenever you like. Soft 3 minutes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. But at the same time, I'm trying to learn more about the American Rescue Plan. See what it will provide for our organization. During this pandemic, we were cramped for space. We need to expand. Will there be enough capital improvement funds to do that? Hopefully that It would help us to meet the challenge. We have to reduce the amount of young people that will be in our summer camp because we don't have the space to do social distancing, and also to provide some of the activities because of the lack of space. But if we can expand, we can go back to doing the things that we normally do. It's a challenge right now, but because of the assistance that we have received from the town of Carrboro and some of our other partners, we are able to maintain. But we want to be able to keep our growth going rather than reduce because of lack of space. And so I just want to learn about this American Recovery plan that is going to be in place. And I'll come back next week and I'll talk about, or whenever you have an opportunity for me to talk about the Human Service Advisory Commission recommendation when it comes to supporting what we do. And with that support, I can say that the amount of meals that have been provided through the year of COVID is right there at 15,600 meals that we have able to put on the table of our resident in and around Carrboro and Chapel Hill. Basically because of the works that have come from the staff of Carrboro, as well as a lot of the organization that have been helping us. And so I'm just trying to learn more about what is available and what I can ask for.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. Yeah. And so we'll all learn a little more here in that next item. Then feel free to come back next week and talk to us further about that and your other concerns that you mentioned to us, which we're familiar with. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll head on now to Ms. Harrington. It's good to see you, Ms. Harrington. You can speak whenever you like.
Thank you. And yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it might be. We can hear you, but it might be better if you turn your video off because it might be drawing a little bit on your power.
Okay, I'll do that. It didn't. Because I'm in my car now. Okay, stop video. Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think it's a little stronger now with the video off. We can hear you.
Well, if not, I can come back next week because I'm sitting in my car now. I was in a meeting with CFAC. But what I really just wanted to talk about is people in recovery and how we have been struggling through the pandemic, because a lot of people didn't have jobs and things like that. And homelessness is a problem, but when you have also the disease of addiction, that makes it a real dilemma. So we are trying to have peer supported housing where people are democratically run and they're taught self-efficacy. But our problem has been turnover, low vacancies, which is allowing us not to be able to meet all our financial obligations, because the financial obligations come with us filling our beds and everybody paying their equal share of expenses. Now, y'all have the town of Chapel Hill and Carrboro have helped us a lot, and I hope that they continue so that we can have a little seed money for when people first come, while they're looking for a job, while they're getting back on track, because a lot of them, have criminal records and things of that nature. I have 23 years of sobriety. I was in the first women's Oxford House in Chapel Hill, and I retired from UNC Chapel Hill in 2012. And even though I graduated from college, I still had this disease. And so we need a place, and in this area, and Orange County has been fabulous. And that's why we want to keep it going. People like to come here, but finding jobs through this pandemic has really hindered us a lot, to make bills, so now we're trying to pay landlords, trying to get utilities caught up with just the people that are there. So a little seed money and money when they first come in would be helpful, and that's what we are continuing to ask about.
All right, Ms. Harrington, thank you for coming and speaking to us. And again, we'll continue having conversation next week as well. We appreciate it.
I'll be glad to talk more. And thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you.
Lydia, could I jump in on that for just a second while Ms. Harrington's still on?
Sure. Miss Harrington, are you still there? Jackie Guess wants to say something.
Yeah, we just heard from Katie, who is still on, that finding talent is a real problem for our business community. And I'd like to suggest that our business community and Oxford House get together and see if they can work out some ways of helping to provide employment for people in Oxford House and for Oxford House to help the business community find good people to work. And so, Katie, I'd really appreciate it if you and Paula can get together and talk about this.
Love the idea, collaboration.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
All right, great.
Thank you. Okay, and I want to hear from both of you how that went. So thank you.
Is it some way that I can get her information?
Kathy Durando can make sure you two connect. Yes.
I'll make sure that happens. Kathy can give you Paula's information as well.
Thank you. Much. I'll talk to y'all next week. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks for letting me interrupt.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay, so we're going to drop off our members of the public just from this conversation. Y'all can continue to listen and so forth. But now we'll get to council members to go ahead and have conversation here. And I think in order I have Jackie and then Susan and then Sammy.
Thank you. I, along with Barbara, want to talk about the stormwater and Bard out. But before we get to that, I want to bring up again, and I'm so serious about this. When I look at the projected cost for 302, and I look at everything I'm reading about the increased cost of construction materials, and this is not just, somebody said it was, oh, one of the council members' husband bought a sheet of plywood and it was really expensive. Yeah, that's true. But I also went in and did a lot of research into it. It's not just sheets of plywood which are going up. It's all construction materials, and they're going way, way up. And our response from Perkins and Will was that it's up 5% is already built into the budget. Construction material and labor are going up way beyond 5%. So my question is, if we're right, and I hope I'm wrong, and construction materials go up above 5%, say they go up, I mean, right now they're between 20 and 40% higher. And with the boom going on, there's no telling when they're going to go down. If it goes up beyond that 5%, where's the money going to come from to pay for it? Is the county going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come from? I'm really concerned about this. You know, I'm not just speaking as the wife of a local builder. I don't like being categorized that way. I've done research into this, and cost of materials everywhere are really, really going up. And if we're planning on starting this year, what are we going to do about that? The cost of labor is also really going up, which I think it should, but it is. So it goes up above the 5% in the budget. Where's the money coming from? I don't expect an answer right now, but I would like one at some point.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. And I saw Mr. Manager nod his head, so we can kind of hear back from that again or further, or kind of taking into account these, concerns. Do you want to address it right now, Mr. Manager?
Well, Council Mayor Jackie, we're going to have an item on the 8th or the 15th that's going to go all in line item detail through the new cost estimate for the 203 project. I mean, I think you've got some real valid concerns. I mean, we've got, some solutions or options that might address the issue. And I think it's more than a brief conversation, if you don't mind. But I do understand and appreciate your concerns.
Well,
Okay,
and that's,
good. I'm glad
to hear we have an agenda item coming up specifically about that. So
yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. So we'll move on then now to Susan, and then Sammy, and then Barbara.
Thank you, Lydia, and David and Arch, Carrie, who's not here, but I just want to thank you all so much for all of your work preparing this budget. And David, I guess this is your 11th, you say, 11th budget for for Carrboro, and once again a budget that you've been able to keep taxes as low as they can possibly be, and also continue to provide really high quality services for Carrboro. So to you and your whole finance team, really, really appreciate it. My major concern is this. So Barbara mentioned earlier about the budget sort of reflecting the priorities and values of our community, and the stormwater management and affordable housing and human services and police and fire. And I know that one survey after another shows that people just really value these services. They believe they're getting really high quality services. And I feel like the only way we can continue to provide those high quality services, is if we also really prioritize our employees. And so I'm going to begin with the 2.9% salary increase. I would really love to see that be a 3.3% salary increase, which would cover the consumer price index for both fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. And I think Carrie's number said this would cost about $46,000, but I feel like that is a really good investment in our staff, money well spent. The other thing I wanted to mention is Chapel Hill has approved this housing incentive program. And I hope that we can at least consider, I know it's a tight budget, but also I would love it if we could at least consider this for Carrboro. In Chapel Hill, it gives town employees who are earning 115% of AMI or below. They receive as much as $7,500 to go toward the down payment or closing cost on a home. And it's an opportunity for us to, some employees don't want to live in Carrboro. They like that separation, but for those who do and can't afford it, this may open up a few doors for them to live close to where they work. And the other, my other comment on staff was, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but with the American Rescue Plan, this of course will lead to, a lot of really exciting new projects for Carrboro, and just want to make sure that the staffing is in place for these new projects. And, I'm sure this has already been thought out and what have you, but, I just was sort of thinking, even just with the reporting, which I know is very extensive with this funding, is there enough staffing in the finance department and some of the other departments that will, of course, be seeing more funding coming their way. So I just wanted to throw that out. And one final thing on staffing is, David, I noticed that the salary for the Economic Development Department had dropped rather significantly. It was like from 94,000 to 82,000. And I just hope this didn't mean I want to make sure everybody's salaries are holding steady and going up. So it just sort of caught my eye, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but I was just wanting to bring your attention to that. And then just a couple things that not related to the staffing per se, but I also noticed in the budget revolving loans for economic development. That was a big drop, 853,000 to 479,000. And I appreciate Katie's comments about the grants, but I didn't know why there was, such a big drop in that at a time when we're coming out of the pandemic. We're trying to encourage economic development. And I'm also curious if some of those loans could actually be turned into grants, to Katie's point. And then I just wanted to reinforce my support for Reverend Campbell's comments earlier this evening about the opportunity to expand Rogers Road Community Center. And I have a chance to see all of the great work they do there on a very regular basis. And I really appreciate how short they are on space. They're looking at, I think, the same formula that was used when the community center was built, which would be 43, 43, 14. So I think Carrboro's portion would be about 42,000 to be able to allow this expansion of tutoring services and summer camps and after school programs. So I'm hoping that that will be included in this budget or perhaps through the American Rescue Plan funding. So that's my comments, and thank you, David, and also Arch. Thank you for all of your hard work in putting this budget together, which, like I say, is I think a real reflection of who we are as a community. I think you nailed it. Thanks again.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Susan. Let's go on to Sammy and then Barbara.
Yes, I just also want to echo all the work on creating the budget. Thank you, Arch and Manager Andrews, for the many years of budgets that you've been making. Very much appreciate it. That magic that y'all do, because it really is magic from my perspective sometimes. And it makes us look good. Thank you for doing that so well. So the main thing, it sounds like we're going to have a good conversation in the next item. And I think some of the things that we can talk about have to do with that injection of significant funding that is on the horizon. And so I'd be interested in what we're talking about in this item relating to that item. And I know we're just putting things out there, and some will fall into the box of what's allowable in the next one, and others will have to be in this one. So that isn't necessarily clear. And so to whatever degree we can maximize using those federal funds that are on the horizon, for example, and as Susan pointed out, creating those loans we made earlier during the pandemic from the revolving loan fund as grants, and then replenishing our revolving loan fund back to the levels it was at before. Or in the marketing assistance, there's an opportunity, a long-standing goal that we've had as a town of supporting our locally owned businesses. Well, this is the perfect opportunity to maximize people's awareness of the importance of supporting our locally owned businesses through a concerted effort and campaign. What better time? I am concerned about Jackie's point about the construction, and I look forward to learning more about that. In terms of hiring freeze, I sent an email earlier out to everyone in terms of this question on the school resource officers. And in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and the conversations about the prison to pipeline, the school to prison pipeline, and how we can do policing better. And so I look forward to hearing what is the justification for hiring those two positions, which is currently funds for the school resource officers, in light of the fact that the schools are still studying whether they have that need or not, and that study won't be available until the end of this summer. And we as a town are putting together a task force to assess these things. So I don't want us to jump the gun and make that commitment of resources in hiring two positions so early without even knowing if they're school resource officers or not. And if we hire them for some other purpose and then we find out we need school resource officers, that zero uptick in personnel is really two personnel, because we could find that we need the school resource officers. So there's a lot of questions I have there that I hope we as a council can address. But the biggest concern of all is one that has to do with taking some perspective. We've just come out of a pandemic where things are so dire that we had to freeze everything. Everything stopped. And it was a microcosm that was so small compared to what's on the horizon in terms of the climate emergency and the 10-year window that we have to act on it. And it really breaks my heart that when we passed a resolution as a council in 2019, directing the town managers to charge staff to update cost estimations of current and proposed projects and activities, and develop a 10-year annual climate emergency budget proposal for implementing updated climate action plan goals related activities and projects for consideration by the Carrboro Board of Aldermen beginning in the 2020-21 budget cycle and annually thereafter. So that's this budget cycle. And then that we as a council would assess those recommendations and that update, and based on the cost, ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and our goals and implications for race and equity, we would make a decision on how that would impact our budget and do it for 10 years and annually thereafter. And so we're in budget season now, and I know like one of the main staff person involved with our climate is on maternity leave. So this is not on her. This is more about us in making sure that we are fully staffing this essential action, mitigation for climate. And in the same way that we've done over the years for stormwater and affordable housing, we've ramped up the staffing for that. And we're really doing a lot there. And I'd like to propose that we seriously consider staffing up on taking climate action and maybe look at the savings we've made with the $500,000 on healthcare to really think about allocating those funds to take action on climate. It's not for lack of funds. We've made huge savings there. And this is an emergency, much like, and unfortunately worse than what we saw with the pandemic. And so that's the main thing that I'm really focused on and interested in, and hope we can get a handle on.
Thank you, Sammy. Thanks for your comments. Let's go on now to Barbara.
So I love that Councilmember Slade referred to the budget process. He used the word magic. I just love it. He's like the magic. And it actually is it's magic. And so I do want to also echo what other council members have said. Thank you, and just really grateful to Arch and his finance team and David and how you guys just really work together to bring us the budget, every single year. Your efforts, don't go unnoticed, and they are appreciated. So thank you. And so speaking of magic, so Sammy talked about, and I understand where he's coming from, as far as I think about the climate change action plan and the energy and climate plan, and all this work that is going Laura Janway's way, and it is a lot of work for her. So I just wanted to just follow up with Councilmember Slade and just understanding that and why he would suggest that we consider some type of support for Laura as we move forward with our climate change mitigation here in town. I also want to lift up the Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund, as well as the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, and appreciating those two dedicated revenue streams, and also just knowing, as I think all of us know, that we want more. And not sure what that would look like, considering the framework around both of those processes and what this council has agreed to. But I did want to lift it up as needs continue to rise. We heard from Ms. Newton tonight. We hear from other folks, periodically. Certainly, affordable housing, continues to be an issue. I think about Eleazar Posada, who was burned out of his apartment in Poplar Place, and in speaking with him, he was like, that was something I could afford, Barbara. I don't know where I'm going to find somewhere else here in town, that, according to his budget. So I just wanted to lift up affordable housing and stormwater along with the climate change, and just really not knowing what can be done, other than what we already have established with these two dedicated revenue streams, but just these are priorities. So, so what can we do, other than what, we have already set up? And I also, if council members are willing And all I'm saying is I would love to ask for information on a participatory budgeting process. And all I'm asking is if council members would agree for information to be gathered about that process. It involves community members being able to decide how to spend part of a public budget. I don't know if it's been done before. Maybe somebody's brought it up before, but it was something that, that I was just thinking about as I, kind of ran through the budget and, was just reading, our board packet and just engaging community, about how they want to see those public dollars spent. So I would love for council members to consider that. It could be a pilot. I don't know how it's going to be set up. Right now, I just would love information. And I see it as a possible enhancement to our current budget process, which is absolutely amazing. It's a good process. But I see it as a possible enhancement to an already very good budget process. And that was a question about participatory budget.
Thanks, Barbara.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor LaBelle. Can I ask one thing? Are we actually going to have a work session, or are we going to talk about that after we go through, let council members talk and finish the agenda item? I didn't know if we were actually going to have one or what thoughts were about that.
Yeah, I think tonight is about hearing people's general thoughts and priorities and just kind of reactions to what David has said. And then in conjunction with what we're going to get next. Because, I really want to hear what although I've read the item and everything, what can we do with the next one that might supplement or be in tandem with this? And then I imagine next week when we have our public hearing, after we hear from members of the public, then we can start our conversation. And then if we want to schedule another work session after also. So that's kind of the way I envision the night going. And I appreciate your comments about the participatory budgeting. I mean, that's, I think cities where you clearly have kind of like districts or things like that. It'd be interesting if we do it here. How do we figure out get our groups set? But I like it. I think it's an awesome idea, worthy of discussion for sure. All right, let's move on here to Damon.
Thank you. These were all great comments. And so most of my comments were questions were mostly going to be about the next agenda item. So I'll be pretty brief here. And I just wanted to affirm my support or back up a lot of what other council members have already said, including the proposal to increase employee pay to the 3.3%, which I support. I thank Susan, and I think maybe Sammy and other council members had brought that up previously. And appreciated Jackie's comment. I want to learn more about Jackie's comments on the 203 project, and I'm glad we're going to be getting a presentation about that. And David, a good part of your presentation, and one that we talked about one-on-one as well, was the employee health plan. And I remain intrigued, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to reduce costs both for the town and for employees. I think, like a lot of health insurance plans, they're complicated, they're hard, can be hard to understand. And I think I want to make sure that we all have a good understanding of this shift, so that we can feel really secure that we're not putting employees in a position of not being able to figure out how to use it, for example, and not being able to figure out how to navigate their health insurance benefit. I feel good. I'm glad that Julie has been meeting with staff and talking about what the benefit is. But I feel like if I'm having trouble understanding the new plan, then I think maybe I'm not the only one. So would just like to be interested in hearing more about that in the future, and in particular making sure that we have a clear understanding that we're essentially holding our employees harmless when it comes to the costs that they put out for their healthcare. Sammy's question about or comment about the school resource officer issue, or more generally just kind of the vacant positions in the police department. I think as part of that response, when you're ready to prepare it for us, David, going back to the resolution we passed a year ago, June, where this issue came up around hiring. I think maybe part of that conversation is to be a reminder that resolution included a request to freeze or to suspend hiring for those vacant positions until we had made some determinations at the council or had this further conversation, presumably through this method that we've chosen of a task force to explore public safety issues before jumping into filling those positions. So I just want to throw that out there and just sort of affirm Sammy's concerns about what we're doing there. In addition to what Sammy already shared about the school district's committee that is almost hopefully finished with its work, evaluating how they hopefully are going to develop school-based programs to provide for students' safety and well-being rather than law enforcement-oriented programs. So I look forward to hearing more about that and just more, as Sammy said, kind of the rationale behind the recommendation of the town's budget. I appreciated also Sammy's reminder to all of us that we did, in fact, as a council, adopt a resolution that asked for preparation of a so-called climate emergency budget in parallel with the annual budget process. So I would like to see some more information about that. And then finally, I love Barbara's question and comment about participatory budgeting. I think as most of us already know, Durham has been doing participatory budgeting for a couple of years at least now. They're in the process now of taking recommendations and polling residents of Durham about their participatory budget process, specifically related to COVID-19 relief. And so, this is something I was hoping that we'd also talk about in the next agenda item, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, because I think that might offer us an opportunity to, as Barbara suggested, trial run something, pilot something that could then be translated later into a future general budget process. If we have a participatory element that really builds up the process of community input on how to spend those funds, that's a method we might use for our more general budget process in future fiscal years. So I appreciate Barbara bringing that up. It's an exciting idea and something that we should be doing more of because it is a method of community building and engaging residents in the process of translating our priorities into our budget. And I think that's it for now. I'll definitely have some questions about the Rescue Plan Act funds later on, but I'm looking forward to learning from staff more about what we can actually do with that money. So thanks, David.
Thanks, Damon. Let me make a couple of brief comments myself, and then we'll move on to the next item. As has been noted, Mr. Manager, Arch, everyone, again, so much this coming forward somehow with this budget that only includes this commitment we made to that increase for affordable housing, that $1.50 over the last 4 years. And during my time on council, we maybe had 1 year, we had a very, very small increase early on, but it's been 12 or 13 years since we've increased the tax rate, and really appreciate the efforts of staff to be really smart about the ways over the years we've refinanced and done different things imaginatively to still provide great service, but not raise that tax rate. Other comments. And I appreciated, Mr. Manager, you were talking about the new positions. You kind of have done a little retrospective of your time with us, the new positions since you've been here, and you talked about the 3 houses and the 3.5, I guess, stormwater. Also during your time, you've really brought us some excellent other positions, like our communications manager, for example.
Right.
And some others, really important positions at the right time. Laura's position, Laura Genway, and others. So a couple of comments I want to make, y'all, with regard, for example, to the health plan. I'm a fan of this health plan, and I don't know, Mr. Manager, if we are able to get someone to explain it in a way that assuages, I think, some of the fears of some of the people on this council. Am I correct that it's the same one the county has? Because I know that Alicia has a plan like this. It's very similar to this with Orange County, and it has served her really well, and it's really excellent. And the savings, when you consider the savings here, it almost is like one of these things seems too good to be true, but it has really worked out. I think for them, and I'd be interested if it's not the same one, what are the similarities, or what about it? I know one conversation you and I had was, did all of the network folks that our staff go to, would they all be covered under this plan? Were they all in? I think you were doing an inquiry to make sure that who people originally went to were in service. So I know that's one question you and I talked about.
Right.
With regard to, I had one or two other, but the participatory budgeting, really excellent, interesting idea. It'd be nice to figure out how to set up something like that next year. With regard to the budget, my memory is that we did it last year or 2 years ago, I guess, because last year was the pandemic. And my memory is that the budget was really, as might be expected, really expensive. But I don't know if there's a way to, I don't know how you do that again and make it be more manageable or be more, I'm not sure how we address that each year in the context of something that's actually a realistic type budget we can move toward. But I think that's the idea, is to have it represented there. What would it be? So I just kind of throw that out there with regard to that budget. And then as for the 2 police positions, as you'll recall, y'all, I mean, I voted against it last year. I didn't think we should have frozen those 2 positions last year. Here we are a year later, and we've really had, hardly any movement on that. Reality is it'll be at least a year or more before that task force report is out. I appreciate the schools having conversation, but I would go ahead and let those positions move forward. But that's just me, just one vote out of everyone. I just wanted to put that out there. All right, so Mr. Manager, I guess if there's no other comments right now, I think we're all really interested in the next item, hearing about the American Rescue Plan Act from you.
Do you want any conversation? I mean, just any feedback on some of the things like why the police or whatnot?
Anything that we asked tonight, you mean, that you might want to respond?
Yeah, just a few comments if you're okay.
Please. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
What? Oh, I'm sorry, David.
No.
Over here. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to start off by saying that I'm going to miss working with all of you. And also I'm going to miss working with Arch, because Arch was here when I got here, and we got together, we talked, and we said, man, we're on the same page. And we always have been. We've worked together in tandem really well, and I just want to say that Arch is the most outstanding finance director I've ever worked with, and he's a huge part of our success. And we're not done yet, but I want to make sure that I recognize that, and that is the truth. So, thank you, Arch McAdoo. So, with that said, just a couple of things. Again, we're going to have the 203 project. That is a concern with rising costs, and either the 8th or the 15th, I think it's going to be the 15th, we're going to make a presentation on that. We've been in conversation with Orange County, and just as early as today, with some of the concerns that they have. And so we'll know more by the 15th, but we'll be bringing that back to you. It sounds like there's probably support for the 3.3%. We can look at at a housing incentive. I'll do more research, but on the revolving loan fund, I think the principal went down because we allocated some money during the pandemic and loaned a lot of that out as part of the COVID relief, which took away from the balance that was in the revolving loan fund. But we'll get more in depth. I'll get more specific with the numbers, but that's a general. I think with the RENA request, our part would be about $42,000. I think we could either find that in the American Rescue Plan money or through the general fund. I don't see a problem with that. Just to answer the question. Let's see. In terms of the school, okay. In terms of start with climate emergency. One of the reasons that you haven't seen the larger budget is, we've seen what can one person do, Laura, in the work plan, and without increasing staff and increasing the tax rate or whatnot. So that's kind of what we thought was a realistic workload for one person. But we could certainly look at that again. The participatory budget process, I think, is really lots of people are doing it. I know the city of Durham is doing it. And so we could look at what they've done. I think they did a pilot program when Tom Bonfield was the manager there. So before he retired. So we'll look at that. I feel good about the employee health plan, but I certainly realize that it's a big change. And so I'll get with Julie and our broker to report back on that. And finally, I'll just say that with respect to the SROs, we recommended we had a hiring freeze, and so we froze those 2 positions. We froze 1 or 2 in Rec and Park, several in Public Works, 1 in Planning. And so the idea was post-pandemic, let's fully fund each department. The school resource officers have been reassigned. And one of the things that local governments do is it's really difficult, but how many police officers do you really need? And so one rule of thumb has been the number of police officers per 1,000. And I can say that since I've been here, and I think even before, the number of police positions in the police department has been 42. And it has been for at least 10 or 12 years. It would be 40 now. But at any rate, we say how many officers per 1,000. And if we have 3 admins, we take that out of the 42 to get 39 and a population of 20,000. We're at like 1.95 officers per 1,000. That's really pretty low, really. I mean, that's just in terms of need. Sometimes the absence of crime is a deterrent, crime. So it was just an idea of maybe just general staffing, but not necessarily related to anything, any kind of policy decisions, but more from an operational and a staffing standpoint. And if you all want to keep those positions frozen, that's certainly a decision that you make. I was just trying to put the police department on parity with other departments. And that's it.
Thanks,
Lydia,
David.
you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah. I thank you, David. I see Damon, you have your hand up.
Yeah, David, I really appreciate that response. It's very helpful to understand where you're coming from on that. I guess I just a couple of comments. One related to the comment about hiring freeze, and I just want to at least share my understanding of that when it comes to the decision the council made last June. The what you're calling a hiring freeze with respect to those vacant positions in the police department was unrelated to the COVID pandemic. It was related to the resolution we adopted in June of last year, specifically about the police department. It wasn't about the COVID pandemic. It wasn't about the general staff hiring freeze for the town. So I want to make sure we're parsing that out and keeping those clearly separate issues. And second, I guess I would just, again, just as we expressed in the resolution last year, we didn't ask to cut the budget. We didn't ask to eliminate the positions. We simply asked for postponing and filling of the positions. And I'm just thinking, if we know, as Sammy has said, that we're expecting some kind of determination. We don't know what it'll look like, how far it will go, or whatever, from the school district about their own committee's work on the top of school resource officers. Can we at least commit to holding off until we get some information from them about what they're working on, or what some decisions may be coming from them? So again, the decision by the council last year was not to eliminate positions. It was simply to hold off on filling positions until we learn more. And since it seems like we're on the precipice of learning more from the school district about their school resource officer program, it would at least make sense to me anyway to see what they come up with. So thanks again.
Thanks, Damon. Let's see, I see Barbara's hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I just kind of wanted to follow up. I too am still in line with that resolution from last June and what those of us who voted for it, what we committed to, as we've been reminded by Damon. And so that's basically all I wanted to say. I'm happy to stay in the same holding pattern we've been in according to the resolution from June of last year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. All right, let's, Sammy.
Yeah, I just want to further underscore, I mean, definitely at a minimum, wait for the report from the schools. And there's no reason to hire someone who may not have a job if they don't need that person. But I think we should also be thinking more in terms of the task force and its work and how we can better use our resources as a town to do public safety in line with the movement that is happening now in this country, public safety that is in support of people, well-being. And so we had a presentation about mental health, and we were shocked at how awful that system is. And they presented, their presentation was just on one quadrant of this ecosystem of how to do mental health better. But the other aspects that we could do a better job in is a rapid response force. And I mention this because the resources, the money represented by hiring 2 people, whether we spend that money hiring those 2 people or not, that is money that's sitting there that could be used right now to assess and jumpstart the process to really augment what we heard about mental health in our county. And I really hope we have that conversation sooner than later, especially if that's money that's idling, that we really take the opportunity to allocate that money to jumpstart a process that we know our county needs. And we can lead our partners, both the county and the other jurisdictions, in creating that rapid response force. So I'm interested in us really going beyond just waiting for this report from the school. I want us to assess for ourselves, what do we want to do with our money?
Thanks, Sammy. All right, y'all. Conversation. Let's move on to the American Rescue Plan Act, and let me just note. So we have one more item after that, the parking lease agreement. I have a sense. I have a feeling that last item will go fairly quickly. We've allotted 10 minutes for it, but just kind of looking around. Do we see? Okay, I think we'll be able to get through both of these items then pretty well tonight. Okay, so Mr. Manager, let's go ahead and head on here then with the American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay, thank you for your feedback on the budget. That's really helpful. We'll make. I got a good idea of what the majority wants. So thank you. Okay, so Arch McAdoo is going to make the presentation on the American Rescue Plan Act. Arch.
Yes. Can y'all hear me? I'm trying to get my screen.
Yes, we can hear. We can hear you, Arch.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. The American Rescue Plan Act is a unique piece of legislation. It presents local governments with an opportunity as we're coming out of the pandemic, and businesses are beginning to recover. We now have resources that can help us to expedite keeping the virus down and also restoring our economies. This piece of legislation has required the finance team to go back to school. We read the Treasury guidance. We've participated in webinars with the League, National League of Cities, School of Government. And it's been real interesting and it's been real exciting to do all of this stuff. And I found out from the last webinar that I was in was that the Treasury Secretary will probably be issuing some additional guidance going forward. Last Friday, they issued some more guidance and they released the grant terms and conditions that the manager will need to sign, and also the civil rights resolution that we will need to sign to get monies. I reached out to NC Pro today and found out that the state did request some funds for the non-entitlement cities, and they received those monies on Friday. So we should be getting some money soon. What I would like to do this evening and is to just basically go over and review the objectives and how the Treasury envisions us using the funds and eligible expenses. And what they've done is, we'll see the categories. They've created some main categories, and under each category, they've created some non-exclusive lists of allowable expenditures. And then there's another section that encourages us to spend things on people that were hit the hardest by the pandemic. And then there's the prohibited expenses. And I would like to bring you up to date on the Towns Award and the uses that we are looking at so far. And then I would like to talk about going forward with that. Basically, the funding objectives, they got four. One is to support the urgent COVID-19 response efforts, to continue decreasing the spread of the virus and bring the pandemic under control. The second objective is to replace some lost revenues for government in order to strengthen the support for the vital services that they provide, and also to retain jobs. The third objective is to support immediate economic stabilization for households and businesses. And the last one is to address the systemic public health and economic challenges that have contributed to the unequal impact of the pandemic. The couple of things to note is that, and I'm sure some of you may have already noticed, but the counties and metropolitan municipalities, those with population $50,000 or more, will receive their funds directly from the federal government. All other municipalities, which they refer to as non-entitlement units, will receive their distributions from state government, NC Pro. There's a nice clause in the guidelines and legislation that says states cannot further restrict the use of funds beyond Treasury guidelines to the non-entitlement units. I wrote this last week. We're going to receive 50% of the funding fairly soon. The balance will be in 12 months. We need to obligate all monies by December 2024, and we need to spend all the money by December 2026. And the recipients of these funds have broad flexibility to decide how best to use the funds to meet the needs of their communities. And on the use of funds, there's 6 broad areas. Support for the public health response, address the negative economic impacts, replace public sector revenue losses, premium pay for essential workers, broadband infrastructure, and water and sewer infrastructure. Now, under each category, these are the non-exclusive activities that the Treasury Secretary has proposed. Now, just because something is not on this non-exclusive list doesn't mean it can't be funded. As long as we can show the link between, the impact of the COVID-19, and that we have a plan for remedying that, then that's possibly allowable. But this is primarily, on the, mitigating the medical expenses and behavior, and for certain public health and safety staff. Yeah. The also in the as part of the act is the provisions for behavioral health care. There's a recognition that this pandemic has created havoc on people, and people have picked up bad habits or returned to their old bad habits, and so we have like you can do mental health treatment, substance misuse, hotlines, crisis intervention, and that's a nice touch, because a lot of times people don't think about the behavior that happens after something is over. The negative economic impact. This category responds to the economic harms that workers, families, small businesses, industries, nonprofit, and the public sector. Under the individuals and households, they're suggesting, aid to unemployed workers and job training, aid to households facing food, housing, or other financial insecurities, support for survivors benefits for family members of COVID-19 victims, small businesses, the list of loans, grants, in-kind assistance, technical assistance, counseling programs to help small businesses rebound from the downturn. The impacted industries, the legislation, okay, there we go. Specifically points out the travel and tourism industry as one that has been really impacted, and other industries in the community may have been hard hit as well. Rebuilding public sector capacity. This is where they allow governments to rehire public sector staff and begin to rebuild the capacity from the pandemic. It includes things such as replenishing your unemployment insurance trust funds up to the pre-pandemic level, building internal capacity to implement economic relief programs. And some of the things they included under that was like investment in data analysis, targeted outreach, technology infrastructure, and impact evaluations. Public sector revenue loss. This is the one that David likes. Use funds to provide. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why my finger wants to be so fast on this thing. Okay, here we go. The Treasury Secretary's guidance to us in terms of calculating out, how you determine, your revenue loss. Well, somebody came up with this wonderful methodology to calculate your reduction in revenues. We've done that, and later on I'll show you how much we're looking at recapture. And they also allow us to compute that revenue loss several times. The base year is 2020, but you can also do it 21, 22. And it's your average, you have to factor in your average annual revenue growth over the 3 years, or use the 4.1% annual growth rate. That is the national average state and local revenue growth from 2015-18. And you use whichever one is higher. Okay. In terms of the public sector revenue loss, you can calculate that immediately and deploy funds to address that. and like I said earlier, you will have an opportunity to recalculate that. And one of the things that, if depending upon the timing, if we want to recoup our revenue loss in this current fiscal year, then we would have to amend our current budget to move the all of these monies into the current year's budget. We were hoping and waiting before we actually moved it into the budget is to get the executed terms and conditions of the grant signed. And so we had planned on adding this to the 2021-22 budget in the special revenue fund, consistent with the grant project ordinance the council passed back in May. Premium pay for essential workers. This is support for people who have and will bear the greatest, health challenges because, they're out serving people. We can provide the premium pay directly or through grants to private employers. Premium pay covers a broad range of essential workers, and there's a list of them here. But it's basically those people that are on the front lines. Okay, the Secretary's guidance also asks recipients to prioritize premium pay for the low income workers. And then there's a provision that if you're going to increase a worker's total pay above 150% of the grade of the state or county average annual wage, then you need to be able to justify that. Broadband infrastructure. We're permitted to make an investment in broadband, and they're looking for that investment to address areas that are currently unserved or underserved. They don't have wireline connections, or they don't have reliable internet speeds. They suggesting that we build broadband infrastructure with modern technologies in mind. And they encourage us to pursue fiber optic investment. And I think our IT staff has done a wonderful job of, installing fiber optic cabling throughout the town. The other activity is assistance to households to support internet access or digital literacy. Water and sewer infrastructure. This is necessary to improve access to clean drinking water, invest in wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. Building, upgrading facilities, consolidating or establishing drinking water systems, publicly owned treatment infrastructure, facilitating water reuse, cybersecurity, and it has to be a necessary investment to maintain a level of service that meets applicable health-based standards. This is the section where they encourage you to do expenditures for the disproportionate public health and economic impacts on low income communities. And we haven't had a whole lot of discussion from anybody about this. So I would anticipate we're probably going to be receiving some guidance from either the School of Government or the League sometime soon on this. But what they want to do is they want you to focus on the hardest hit communities. They want you to focus on those health disparities and the social determinants of health, promoting healthy childhood environment, investments in housing and neighborhood, excuse me, just ineligible uses. We can't use the monies to directly or indirectly offset reduction in net tax revenues. We can't deposit the money into a pension fund. You can't fund debt service. You can't use the money for legal settlements or judgments. Can't deposit money into rainy day funds or financial reserves. Outside of water, sewer, and broadband, no infrastructure. You can't increase funding above the amount allocated under your revenue loss provision. Once you calculate that revenue loss provision, that's it. That's the standard. Reporting requirements. So far, non-entitlement units will only be required to file an annual project and expenditure report, with the first one due October 31, 2021, to the Treasury Secretary. And I understand that the Treasury Secretary will be providing some further guidance and instructions on reporting for the program at a later date. Okay. We have been told that we're going to get $6,200,000 in ARPA monies. We have calculated our revenue loss at $1.8 million. The essential employee pay costs us $224,000, which leaves an unallocated amount of $4.1 million. I might add that in the revenue replacement of 1.8, it includes the $119,000 of occupancy tax revenues that the CTDA did not get. Going forward, I would suggest, just for thoughts and stuff, is that we might want to hold public input sessions and provide opportunities for thoughts and suggestions from the citizens, businesses, and nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. We want to use the summer to identify use that same group to help us identify effects of COVID-19 and the negative impact, and also look at proposing expenditures and activities to remediate that negative impact. Then in the fall, the council would look to establish priorities and develop a plan for the unallocated funds, and at some point hold a public hearing. Some of the possible programs and activities that the staff has brainstormed on is more rounds of human services funding, grants to nonprofits other than human services funding, grants to impacted businesses, grant to Carrboro Tourism Development Authority, do a loan forgiveness for all of the people that got the combination loan grants, and whatever else we could come up with. So that's the basic overview of the act and what's allowable. So I would ask, are there any additional comments? But before that, I would like to add one thing, that it is important to remember that these are one-time dollars. And we have, there's no guarantee that this appropriation will happen again. So we've been advised and cautioned about expanding existing programs and operating expenses, because in 2 or 3 years, the revenue may not be there to continue that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Arch. Good overview. I appreciate that. I want to ask a quick question, and then I'm gonna go to Barbara, Damon, and then Jackie. You had a slide that talked about the revenue replacements. Was that? Can you just remind us that included the TDA money? Did that include the grants that we made last year? That we made in April?
No, the grants were, those
Okay.
were not factored in,
Well, is the revenue replacement, what is that then? What does that consist of?
in the formula they give us, we have to calculate a baseline of what our revenue was and what we thought it should have been.
Okay.
And you use that inflation factor, and whatever the difference is that's what you can ask for.
That was the slide you showed us that had the calculation of the years, and that's what you used to come up with that figure. Okay.
Yeah. It's I'll be happy to send you the formula.
No. I just wondered if you could. I didn't know if it was like it represented this or if it represents a formula, and you've answered the question. I was just curious.
Yeah, we used the formula to come up with that.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's go. Barbara, Damon, Jackie, Susan, and then Sammy.
So thank you, Arch, for your presentation and the guidelines and just making it, clearer, as we begin to receive these funds. I especially appreciate the lifting up of the most vulnerable in our community, as this council had that conversation last year about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our Black and Brown communities. And also, Arch, for reminding us that this is somewhat of a one-shot deal and that we can't really depend on this money other than how we have it and in the time frame that we have to spend it, and reminding us not to get too ahead of ourselves, as far as how we want to use the dollars. So outside of what was mentioned in your presentation already around town staff, one thing that certainly came to mind for me was just thinking about, and maybe this is something that's already in motion, just thinking about our staff coming back to work after a year and a half of working remotely. And, that can be a transition. And, I'm just thinking about safety measures for them as they come back, as I know that some of our spaces are tight. They're tight quarters, people are just kind of up on each other, and things of that nature. So that was something that I was thinking about. And I don't know if that's something that it would cover, but I would think so. Keeping our essential employees safe as they come back to work and into the office spaces. And also wanted to lift up mental health services. We don't know what folks need, what they've been through, how traumatized they are. I mean, I think it's been a difficult time for all of us. So I just do want to lift up the access to the mental health services, or increased access, because we may already have something like that through maybe an employee assistance program or not. I'm not sure.
Well, we do have an employee assistance program.
Okay.
I think it's very limited. I think you do used to do 3, 4, maybe 5 visits.
Okay.
To be covered.
Yeah,
and then anything after that would have to be covered by the health insurance.
Oh, I got it. Okay. So that I think that's pretty standard. But I just want to make sure staff is supported as they move back into work in whatever way they need, and they feel safe coming back to work, and that they have what they need to do that. That's town staff. So now I want to go to community, and for sure we need to pour back into community according to the guidelines in any way that we can. I realize we've been doing food distributions and the funding for housing and utility assistance, access to testing, vaccinations, mental health services. And I'm not sure about the cash payments. I thought there was something mentioned on the slide, but certainly as the guidelines allow that for the most vulnerable in our community and those that really have a need, if that's something that's possible. You did mention internet and broadband access, so certainly we all know that's more important than ever. Got to expand that and get it to the folks that it's not readily accessible to, so that they'll feel supported, with remote learning with the children and potentially work. And the local businesses and nonprofits. Certainly we heard from Karen Dunn from Club Nova. We heard from Paula Harrington with the addiction community. Maddie Hayes, she talked about language access, and of course, Minister Robert Campbell with RENA about those ongoing as well as increased needs due to COVID-19. And so just to provide some type of funding and resources to help our local businesses and nonprofits as they navigate this recovery process. Some of them have changed their business models entirely. I don't know, if they're going to go back and, how best to support them in doing that. And just the invaluable service they provide to our community, and they need our support. And I do want to say about the businesses, and the money, and I think we all know this, we have BIPOC businesses in our community, as well as businesses that belong to the CBA. So, it's important that all businesses in our community have access to this funding, however we decide to push it out. And that's pretty much it. Thank you, Art.
Great. Thanks, Barbara. Damon, then Jackie, then Susan.
Thanks, Lydia. Arch, this is really helpful. Thank you so much for the summary. I had some time to dig through the federal government's interim rule, and like when the federal government interim rules, it is a lot of material, and you could tell there were a lot of hands involved in making it. But having said that, I think not only is your summary really helpful, but I think this offers us some really interesting opportunities here in Carrboro and throughout the county. So I hope we can try to cobble together as a council and as a community some thoughts about what this could mean for us. I guess I have a few questions related to what I read in the materials as well as what you presented, just to make sure I'm understanding things correctly, and then just some thoughts about general, values or principles around how we think about it. But one of the questions actually that I think maybe you answered in response that I think Barbara kind of helped to clarify was, or maybe it was Lydia, the CTDA thing. So CTDA, the Tourism Development Authority, counts as a public sector revenue loss. The losses they incurred from the pandemic is eligible for revenue replacement. Is that right?
Well, technically, the town experienced the loss because the town collects the occupancy tax.
Okay.
And then we manage our administrators' percentage. Then we give those to the TDA.
Okay, gotcha. So in any case, we can figure out a way to treat that as revenue replacement, essentially. That's great. So, I think, the four categories you sort of started out with, the first one being urgent pandemic response, right?
Yeah.
And that the town needs to be directly involved in providing urgent pandemic response. That makes sense. That second category was revenue replacement, I think. And as you say, I imagine that is David's favorite category, right? That this is an opportunity for the town to replace, and that was significant, 1.8 million, I think you said it was. So we should certainly be keeping an eye on that. But it's really these last two categories, right? Economic stabilization, which is primarily around housing assistance and other forms of keeping people safe and secure in the community. And then finally, identifying ways of addressing systemic disparities that presents us not only with the greatest opportunity, but really the biggest challenge of figuring out how we make an impact. So one thing I wanted to just kind of offer as a general idea is, so we're set to receive this $6.2 million. My understanding is that the county is going to be receiving something like $28 million, I think. I don't remember exactly the number. That's right. I assume that Chapel Hill and perhaps Hillsborough are also receiving something significant. So, I think to the extent that all of our all of our local jurisdictions have some shared priorities, some shared values, some shared interests in things we'd like to achieve with these funds, and are able to cooperate in making a bigger impact by acting together, then we should do that. And I think we've seen, and we've talked about this over and over again over the last year and a half, of what a difference it made for us to be able to really streamline our cooperation with the county and the towns when it came to direct housing assistance for people who are experiencing housing crisis, and really put financial assistance, direct financial assistance, into the hands of the people who needed it as quickly and as smoothly as possible. I think that was a sort of way of streamlining our systems in a way that we were cooperating with each other that can be a model for some other goals that we have. So that's one thought. I think another thing that come to mind is, obviously Barbara mentioned this, we want to be prioritizing, I think, things that are going to really directly assist people who are in the greatest need. And I feel like we've had some conversation before about community members who maybe are not eligible for certain forms of assistance because, for example, their immigration status or whatever, and therefore are in even greater state of vulnerability because of that. That we can be targeting aid directly to community members who are in positions of having essentially been excluded from other forms of assistance during the pandemic. So that's another thought. I guess third is, and Sammy kind of highlighted this in our previous discussion, doing things that help us make systemic change. And I don't know if I have answers around this right now, but I just sort of, one that comes to mind, and this is related to Barbara's comment in the last agenda item too, around participatory budgeting. We know that one of the goals that's been expressed around the American Rescue Plan Act funds was to support community building, essentially, by creating mechanisms for community members to participate more directly in how priorities are identified and how these funds are used. And so, if, for example, we were to pursue this idea of participatory budgeting specifically with respect to the ARPA funds, right? Like, here's this money we know the town and the county and so on are getting. What are the categories of things that you think we ought to be prioritizing? And ask people, and setting up. And again, we talked about Durham earlier. Like, they've been doing it for a few years now. They're in the middle of doing it right now. They're right in the middle of another round of polling, essentially, in their participatory budgeting process. If we can create something essentially inspired by the Durham model, where we engage the community in setting those priorities, and see how it works. Are we able to make it happen in a way that actually is reasonable and not burdensome to getting a balanced budget every year? Then how can we translate that experience, a participatory budgeting experience with the Rescue Plan Act funds, into future general budget cycles for the town? In other words, Barbara kind of used the term pilot test, right? Like use these funds as an opportunity to do a pilot test for participatory budgeting that we can then map onto future budget cycles for the town's general budget season. So that to me would be another example of using this opportunity as a way to change how we do things permanently, right? Even though it's only a one-shot allocation of funds, we have used the opportunity to change how we do things in the future, even without these funds. And next,
one comment on the community budgeting.
Sure.
There are a number of tools out there to help people to start involving the citizens in the budget process. And we'll just have to look and evaluate what might be best for Carrboro, depending on what we want to accomplish and how we want to do it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth exploring. Thank you. One question I had, Arch, also from your presentation, this came up when I was reading about the funding, this idea of premium pay for essential workers. I wanted to make sure I understood this, so I didn't think it was too good to be true, but you're talking about this is premium pay for essential workers in the private sector. Is that correct?
Or public sector.
Or, yeah, it's clearly public sector, but it also could include premium pay for private sector employees.
Yes, it could.
So that's an amazing opportunity. And I think in addition to what I think some other council members mentioned earlier tonight about, perhaps forgiving loans that we did for COVID response and so on, is there a way for us to target assistance directly to people whose employment was affected in some way by the pandemic, if they were in those categories of, essential employees? And that's, in Carrboro, that's going to be a lot of different kinds of categories of businesses, like restaurant workers and so on. And we could really make a difference in sort of essentially revenue replacement for individuals in the community. Right. So just one way to think about it is the town's getting revenue replacement for lost tax revenue, but we have a lot of individual citizens in the community or residents in the community who could use some revenue replacement as well. And I know that the longer I talk, the more I'm using up all the $4 million we have left, but I'm just going to offer one or two more ideas. You mentioned that water and sewer infrastructure is an eligible expense. We're doing all of this sewer hookup subsidy work for folks in the historic Rogers Road neighborhood. That seems like a pretty obvious opportunity, assuming it would be eligible, where we could just make those hookups happen instead of requiring people to kind of apply for it and so on. We know which properties are eligible for that, rather than rather than expecting some kind of cost share, we partner with the county on just making those hookups happen. That's really, doubling down on our commitment to the historic Rogers Road community to, in that process of negotiating the closing of the landfill. Sorry, go ahead.
I asked Trish, there's a provision in there that if you're providing services to residents in a qualified census tract that is low income, that has been designated by HUD, then it's wide open almost, in terms of being able to go in there, because you've already designated and shown that this is a low income community, and these are the things that we're going to do to remediate these impacts.
Okay.
I asked Trish earlier if Carrboro had any of those designated tracts, and she was going to get back to me on that.
Yeah, that's really good to know. It struck me, though, that when you were talking about the water and sewer infrastructure category, that didn't seem to be limited to only areas that have been designated as low income. In other words,
right.
They wouldn't have to meet some special threshold. We could just say, we already know that where water and sewer infrastructure is needed in our community, we don't have to prove anything else about it. Let's just do it.
Provided it's necessary.
Yeah, that's right. If it's necessary. But we've already determined that there's sewer hookups in Rogers Road are necessary.
Okay.
Anyway, as you were talking, I was just making this long list of ideas. I think I totally take to heart your comment about this being a one-shot deal. We don't want to create a situation where we're, putting ourselves in a bad spot in the future because we haven't thought through what the permanent changes or what the impacts will be down the road for people as we try to expend this money. But to the extent that we can direct assistance as directly as possible to people who need it, who are most vulnerable, who have most directly impacted, and at the same time change systems and processes to affect the way that we spend our future money, even if we're not getting federal assistance, then I think that would be great. And I'll just keep making a list in my head and maybe other opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Damon. Jackie, then Susan, then Sammy.
Thank you. Arch, I can't thank you enough on behalf of the community for the thought and the work and the really deep dive you did into this to make sure that we're really serving people in the best way we can. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And looking at your time frame, in some cases, the time frame makes sense, but I'm thinking people who are hurting now, I don't want to wait till December to or November to help them, or October to help them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we could have like a two-tiered thing of like immediate need and longer term need. I really want to get to our most impacted, most vulnerable communities. 6 months is a long time when you have a little cushion. When you don't have any cushion, 6 months can land you on the floor. I
agree with you wholeheartedly. You know, I'm not sure how, you know, what the mix will be. You know, you have some immediate needs, and then you're going to have some needs that you know that you can address over time, and it's going to take longer.
Yeah, I'd like to see us come up with a way, and maybe this is next week when we're hearing from people, of allocating some money for immediate needs so we can keep people safe and healthy and moving on. I had two specific questions. Yes, I definitely support using some of the money to help Reverend Campbell. I've been hearing from people in nonprofits, two things from people in nonprofits and in businesses. They're anxious to open, they don't trust their HVAC system. And I'm not talking about completely revamping HVAC systems, but I know that there are filters you can get that would cost maybe, I don't know, $1,500 for a building, for a small building. Would this money be able to go towards getting, improving the HVAC system in order to keep people safe, so that the air is cleaner and they feel better reopening? I think that's part of what we were talking about for our own staff, Barbara. Yeah. And it looked, when my read of it, that would qualify.
Yeah, under the public health response, they've got one category of ventilation improvements in key settings. You know, for example, healthcare facilities, or, you know, that was all they did. So I think I would probably conclude that, yeah, ventilation improvements would be something you could do, depending upon, you know, the services that they're providing.
So say it was a non-health related nonprofit that had people coming in and out all the time, or even if it was a coffee shop that had people coming in and out all the time, and they wanted it to be safer, would they qualify for I'd like to get these filters for a lot of people for the good of the whole community. So that's
let me look and see how far we can push that. You know, if it's a coffee shop, that's a business. They could give them a grant.
Right. If it's a nonprofit, that's also.
You could give them a grant.
Another question I had, as far as people qualifying, because rightly so, and for very good reason, during the pandemic, human services monies, whether they were from us or from donors or for foundations, tended to be really focused on food, housing, and health, which they very much needed to be. But we have a lot of nonprofits who fall outside of those three areas, who, because that's where the money was being focused, they suffered. You know, people dealing with education, or people dealing with rape crises, or people dealing with abused women. Their donations tended to have gone down because money was being focused on food, housing, and health, which it needed to be. But there are these other nonprofits who their revenues suffered because of the pandemic. And I'm hoping we could find a way to help them, because our communities really need them. And my third question was, with school being remote, an awful lot of people were unable to work because they had to stay home and take care of their kids. Would daycare qualify? Would a family where mom hadn't been able to go to work, or dad hadn't been able to go to work because you got to be home with kids, would this money allow us to subsidize daycare for childcare for children so that mom and dad can go work?
That's a good question.
Because that's how we get people back to work.
Hey, Arch.
Yeah.
I would give that one a little bit of thought because they might have to count that as income. We need to think about that one, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way around it of our using money to expand some of the existing childcare facilities and create seats in them so that we're not giving money to people, we're giving money to organizations with a contract that they serve families where parents. I think there's always a do around, I think there's some do arounds to this, but what's keeping people from working? It could even be one of the main problems with our businesses unable to find employees is, hey, I got to take care of my kid.
Right. We understand the intention and we'll look at it for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
One little caveat and stuff is that there's still a lot of questions about what do some of these things really mean? How far can you go with those? And so my guess is I will be having conversations with an awful lot of people going forward, on this in terms of what they're doing, whether or not that's legal, that would include, league staff, NC Pro staff, because one of the things that these monies will be audited. And one of the things is that if you use them for any other purposes, we will have to repay those dollars to the federal government.
I understand.
They've been making that quite clear.
And they should. Yeah. But I'd appreciate having these things looked into. And okay, again, I so appreciate you, Arch. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely look at this.
Thanks, Jackie. Good thoughts there. Let's go to Susan and then Sammy.
Thank you, Arch. I too really appreciate your presentation tonight and all of the work you're doing behind the scenes in terms of learning about this American Rescue Plan. I know it's a lot. The evening has gotten late, so I'm going to try to keep my comments just as short as possible. I had one comment and a couple of rather quick questions, but my comment is, during COVID, we saw two, this is sort of to Damon's point, but we saw two really good examples of collaboration through the rental assistance, where the county was helping to get the rental assistance to, everything was sort of under that one roof as opposed to the municipalities doing that on their own. And then we also saw the example of the Orange County Home Preservation Coalition, which is now doing all of these really neat critical repairs, again, all under one roof. And so I'm just going to sort of throw out this idea for all of us to think about, but it would be taking that same model and looking to see if it's applicable for food assistance. I know that there are a lot of local hunger relief groups in Orange County. And, my dream is to one day have a big warehouse or something where all of these different groups come together. And to tell you the truth, they not only do they share space, but they share volunteers, they share vehicles, they share refrigerators, they share office equipment, they share all the infrastructure they need in order to distribute non-perishable and fresh food. And I think, this idea has the potential to provide huge cost efficiencies and just make us a lot better, frankly, in terms of dealing with hunger relief in a very impactful way. as a long-term solution, rather than right now we have lots of different groups doing lots of different things, and we're not always as coordinated with that effort as we should be. So I'm going to throw that out there as something for us to consider. And then, Arch, I just wanted to follow up on Jackie's questions. Will daycare be provided, and will ventilation be provided? Talk to us a little bit about how this process works. When we have things that we're interested in doing and actually they're not on the list, do you submit something to Treasury about, is this an appropriate kind of request to be making, and then we wait to hear back from Treasury, or how does that process work when we're going off the list?
I'm not sure how our process will work, but one of the guiding principle will be that has there been a negative impact due to the pandemic that we need to address, and we need to be able to identify some service, some activity, something that will correct that, and we need to be able to show the impact and also what's needed to correct it. There's all kinds of advice and guidance coming out of different aspects of it, and I think they'll be coming, and for the next 2 years, if not 3 years and stuff. But if it's the way I operate, if it's real questionable, I call the granting agency and I talk with the program officer and give them the situation and ask them, does this qualify? So I think there will be some instances where we may have to call the NC Pro or the state somewhere, and get further guidance on that. It could be it might be the School of Government. I get an answer quicker from the School of Government. Yeah, but we have resources around us that can help us guide us along the path and keep us out of trouble and make the best use of this money that y'all can.
I'm sure it will be. And Arch, just one more question. I'm just a little bit curious about the process within, and maybe this is a question for David as well, but I'm just curious about the process in terms of the department heads and frankly employees as well, having ideas on how this money can best be spent. To what extent will they be engaged in all of this?
I'll let David answer this, but I can't say that this was a discussion item at the last or next to the last or 2 meetings ago at the management team, where this was discussed and we kind of threw out some ideas there.
I'm going to just jump in right here and say I got a text from David. His internet went out and he's trying to get back on.
Okay.
We can have him follow up with us about that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your thoughtful answers, Arch.
Okay. Thanks, Susan. So then we have Sammy. Sammy, your hand's not up anymore.
Yeah, my real one's up though.
Okay. No, that's okay. You go, and then I have just a few brief comments. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I very much appreciate. I think all the needs that people have listed out are needs we have, and a lot of them, though, it's hard to understand how to prioritize because there's some context I feel we need, and specifically the ones that I'm interested in more context is one is for example, water and sewer, like OWASA is increasing their rates, and we're talking about allowing our town to be more affordable to people. There's an opportunity there in understanding why is OWASA actually raising their rates, and to what degree can we collaborate with our jurisdictions in the spirit of what Damon was talking about in mitigating that raise that on the OWASA rates. So that's something I'd like to look into or learn more about. The other thing is, very big things that are on the horizon, like mortgage and rents. There's a moratorium that will be expiring. How many people in our area will be affected when that tsunami, if it's is it going to be a tsunami or not? Like, what's the degree of impact of that moratorium once it's lifted in terms of people being able to pay for their housing? So I'd like to understand that better. I did a little bit of research before this meeting. The qualified census tract that exists in Carrboro is between Jones Ferry and 54. It's that area. Unfortunately, it doesn't include Rogers Road. So it seems like we would have a lot more leeway on how to use the funds within that geographic area. So to wrap our heads around what the needs are, maybe a participatory budgeting process for that area would be in line. I would be interested in understanding where are the low-income communities in Carrboro that would benefit from connecting that last mile, as the monies say must happen for broadband. We have this backbone, but there's an opportunity to connect that backbone to provide free, very high-speed internet to communities in need and make it more affordable for them to be in our community. So, and then back to, I appreciate a lot of people mentioned many presentations we've been receiving of collaborations that are happening. Susan talking about the Orange County Home Preservation Coalition. In their presentation, they described in that collaboration, they finally, for the first time ever, had to defer some weatherization opportunities because the entity, the Community Action Agency that does that work, met their quota for our county. And so to what degree can we supplement their budget so that more weatherization can happen and they don't meet the ceiling? So I'd be interested in hearing about that. And then I heard a lot of questions that have to do with being the non-pharmaceutical measures for addressing COVID. And we currently have the vaccine. We're very fortunate on this planet to be privileged as a global North country to have the vaccine. And that's really the way you address the pandemic. And so I want us to focus on making sure that we're not still working within the mindset of social distancing and ventilation and all these other things, when what we really could do better is just assure that people are being vaccinated. And that would accomplish, really, that's the solution. So let's focus on that. I appreciate the CBA, again, in the spirit of context, sharing what is it that the business community needs for us to hear about. Because I mean, with all this list, our challenge is how are we going to prioritize these things? The other presentation we received, and I keep raising this, is that ecosystem of behavioral health. And as we know, the pandemic's having a huge impact on that. Mm-hmm. And in the spirit also of collaborating with our jurisdictions to really be thinking about how to have that rapid response team to take some of the work off of what has traditionally been, policing. And so there are synergies that can happen that we can boost, as Damon also pointed out. There's an opportunity to really use this money to pilot and boost things that may have a more lasting impact after we've experimented with them. Those are the basic ones I have. I'm interested in hearing about a bit more of that context and to what degree our neighboring jurisdictions are interested in collaborating with us in some of those projects.
All right, great. Thanks, Sammy. All right, let me make a few comments here. First of all, I have just chiming in from Brandy. She seems to she said this much earlier today, similar interest in, small business loans to disproportionately affected by pandemic, Black, Brown, BIPOC folks, and then also looking at sustained emergency services, food and housing. Just wanted to throw that out from her. I hear this theme echoed by everyone, and I think it's really, really important, this collaboration and this kind of having an understanding of what's kind of being covered out there already, or just natural areas, right? I mean, the governor has a lot of money. The legislature has a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
For instance, he has another press conference scheduled for tomorrow. And the one tomorrow is to share updates on rent and utility assistance. And we may get some more information from how state monies are being used to target some of these needs we're talking about. Now, secondly, the county's getting a whole heck of a lot of money. We all have talked about that, but who's getting the kind of money that's going to go help the schools, right? Are those going to the schools? Are they going through the county? Those might be the more natural arenas. I don't know, Jackie, for parents to ask for childcare or daycare, or I don't know. You know, I just want us to be really thoughtful about that, because you know, at our heart, I think, as we heard at the very beginning of this item, our businesses, our nonprofits are hurting, and they have been really, really had such a tough road to hoe the last year. And especially one of you pointed out the nonprofits, because the fundraising has been down and the services have been greater. So I know for me, ways that we can support our nonprofits trying to raise money while they're building buildings and things. I mean, just a lot going on there. And in our businesses, you know, slowly still trying to open their doors, and then having to pay back these loans we gave them, which I think we all may be talking about, you know, maybe forgiving some of those loans or giving out more grants. Also hearing about how can we figure out how to market, and how can we figure out how to get them talent. So those are other just kind of thoughts I have that a lot of you had that I'm just pulling together. So, all right. Does anyone, I'd like to go on to our last item, but Barbara, I see your hands up. Is that a new hand?
Yeah, and just really briefly, I just want to thank Sammy for raising up the importance of, you know, the vaccinations, and for us to be on the lookout for the fall and new variants, new strains, and all that stuff. And, you know, we may have to line up and do some work around testing and you know, things of that nature. So I appreciate Sammy lifting that up. And I can't say how important it is as we have some of this money now. We'll get more later of pouring it back into the community. And, you know, community is our local businesses, our nonprofits, and certainly the vulnerable, you know, in our community, you know, who are already behind, you know, prior to the pandemic, but now are even further behind.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. All right, good discussion, everyone. So we'll continue this with a public hearing next week. And Mr. Manager, any thoughts or comments about what you heard before we go on to our last item?
No, I think they're all good comments, and we'll work with, you know, we can work with that and report back. So. Okay.
All right. Very good. David, your hands up.
I just wanted to note that I talked to one of the county commissioners today, and my understanding from her is that the county board of commissioners will be hearing about the rescue plan funds for the county this Thursday, I think.
Yeah, it is in 2 days.
Might be worth David checking in with Bonnie about, you know, what priorities she hears about.
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks, Damon. So, Mr. Manager, it looks like our last item, and you know, I did that little straw poll earlier, which is where it seemed like maybe there weren't any huge roadblocks to this next item, but let's go ahead and get forward.
Okay, so this is a potential parking lease agreement with 300 East Main. I think it's fairly straightforward. John Hartman Brown is present. I don't know if you want him to make a presentation or say a few words, or just any questions.
John, can you hear us out there? I know today or yesterday we got access to the agenda item, and I think we were all able to kind of look over the terms of the lease. And so I guess council members, I don't have any questions about that lease. I don't know if anyone else here has questions about it. I see Susan's hand up.
Yes, John, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were going to make a presentation, or were we just jumping right in with questions?
I think we're jumping right in with questions.
Jumping right in. And I'm going to be really quick. One is, John, in the lease, it refers to 62 spaces. And when the Arts Center made the presentation, oh gosh, it was a couple weeks ago, I thought they were referring to like 100, even 100 plus parking spaces. So I was curious why it was 62.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. There's actually additional parking that is available. In all of our initial discussion, we were talking about the immediate parking for the main, the section. If you've seen that lot, it's actually mostly stoned currently. So the existing stone section will hold the 62 spaces. So that would be an immediate kind of come online immediately. The additional improvements, which would come online as a part of the agreement with the Cat's Cradle, would also be that whole 102 spaces.
I gotcha.
There's two other sections that are part.
I gotcha. And then my only other question, there was mention about $50,000 for capital improvements. And would that include signage?
I believe
will there be signage? And
I believe that does include some signage. It primarily includes lighting, improvements to the lot, so another layer of stone to go in there, as well as some ADA accessible spaces and a connection to the Lgbtq Trail.
Okay, great.
Good question, Susan. Thank you. Let's see, Sammy.
Thanks, Susan. That's a good question. So are we going to have another agreement for the remainder spaces? Is one question. And two, is the $50,000 cover all the spaces, both the 62 now and the full amount later?
Yeah, so my understanding, and I'm going to get clarification on this to make sure that our understanding with 300 East Main, we've kind of been working with them as well as Cat's Cradle's engineer, but the 50,000 should cover all of the improvements for the 102 spaces. So it should include all of them. And there was some discussion about a potential cost share between some of those improvements. So the town's actual cost may not even be that full $50,000.
So in the agreement, it says that this covers the improvements for when we go in, and we can't do any improvements after a certain thing. I think it's when you start parking there, and maybe given that there is more improvements happening, there needs to be some clarification there. I don't know. I mean, that's more a question for Nick, maybe legal stuff, but just wanted to flag that in case it's significant. And just lastly, I'm just gonna, again, like I mentioned last time, I'm not supportive of this because there's two studies that show there's plenty of parking in the neighboring parking deck, and for us to commit funds, I recognize like these are cheap parking spaces, but cheap unnecessary parking spaces are expensive ones from my perspective. So I just wish we would have looked at our surplus capacity within the parking deck already and really considered and made this space. I'm fine with investing $50,000 if it were towards making a nicer park than a parking lot park for the use of the Cat's Cradle.
Thanks, Sammy. All right, council members, if there are any other questions, or if not, a motion?
Let's move it.
Motion by Barbara, second by Jackie. All right, all in favor, say aye. Damon?
Aye.
Sammy?
Hey.
Me? Aye. Susan?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
All right, very good, y'all. Okay, so now we will, I want someone to make a motion to continue this meeting to June 6th, which is Sunday. And then everyone, I think our plan is, we'll see each other Sunday, we'll see each other Monday. We'll probably have a closed session at the end of Tuesday night's meeting. I think it's going to be a shorter agenda than usual, just FYI, and continuing along with this. So, but anyway, someone can make a motion to continue the meeting to June 6th.
So moved.
Moved by Jackie, second by
Second. Oh, Damon.
By Damon. All in favor, say aye. Damon.
Aye.
Tammy.
Aye.
Me. Aye. Susan.
Aye.
Jackie.
Aye.
Barbara.
Aye.
All right. See you all on. See some of you on Sunday.
Sunday at noon, right?
Sunday at noon. Yeah, and we may get instructions to get on 15 minutes early. I think that she said that. So keep an eye out for that. So.
Good night.
All right. Good night, y'all.
All right.